Chapter 396. Do you know, my dear Boren? Due to the influence of foolish religions, most ignorant people always believe that hell carries all the evil of this world and even the entire universe. But they don't know that there are many such powerful and terrifying forces in the entire multiverse. As for you, you are neither the strongest nor the most cunning. At least in my opinion, you can't even conquer a mere Earth. You are simply trash to the extreme. Now, have a good taste of the Burning Legion under the Dark Titan Sargeras. Believe me, although they have also encountered unprecedented setbacks and failures on an interesting planet, they're still very successful compared to you. Zhang Cheng mercilessly mocked as he found a clean place to sit down, slowly admiring the hundreds of demons that had been resurrected from the demonic tome of command beating up the other party. Boren was not one of the coolies with the lowest strength among demons. To be precise, after nearly 1,000 years of accumulation, he was already one of the most powerful middle-ranked demons. As long as he could obtain a territory and establish his own evil domain, he would immediately be on par with the capable generals under the Demon King. But regrettably, he had chosen the wrong enemy at the wrong time, in the wrong place today. After all, demons with an evil domain and demons without an evil domain were two completely different concepts. Even if the former left hell, they could ensure an endless supply of magic power from their exclusive domain, not to mention that they had many special abilities and a large number of subordinates who would come to join them. But what about the latter? Apart from their innate strength, they only had a strong physique and a cockroach-like vitality. Of course, it could not be ruled out that some fellows would coincidentally collect some interesting magical items or trump cards in their long lives. Oh, my great master, Lord Kill, Jaden will be very unhappy if he hears you ridicule the failure of the Burning Legion. Succubus Ren had undone her invisibility and appeared behind Leyland. Zhang Cheng didn't know if it was intentional or not, but she pressed her towering and magnificent chest against Zhang Cheng's back and constantly breathed into his ear. Zhang Cheng could even vaguely hear a faint moan. But unfortunately, Zhang Cheng did not react at all. He directly grabbed her slender neck and pressed her against a rock that was hot from the lava, watching as her fair and delicate skin turned red and black from the heat. Hearing the incessant screams from the succubus, he said expressionlessly, "I've warned you many times, don't use your boring little tricks on me, and don't test my bottom line again and again. Also, let me give you a small reminder. This is no longer the world you are familiar with, and it is also not a place the Legion can reach. So from now on, I am your only master. Don't make me unhappy, or I don't mind letting you experience true pain. Cold, heartless, cruel, tyrannical, relying on the absolute suppression of the demonic commanding codex on the middle and lower ranks of the Burning Legion, Zhang Cheng did not hesitate to give these arrogant demons a solid show of strength, because he understood that when dealing with these guys, any kind of goodwill, conciliatory policies, or roping in were all bullshit. There was only overwhelming strength and huge ambition and desire. Only then could he control these extremely dangerous guys. Sensing that the heavy pressure on his neck had instantly disappeared, the succubus Rains hurriedly climbed up from the scorching rock. He covered his severely burned skin and carefully attempted to establish contact with the burning army through the distortion of space-time. But when she realized that the distorted space did not exist in this world, her face was immediately filled with shock. Then, she knelt on one knee and probed with a tone full of sincerity. "I apologize for my foolish behavior just now, my benevolent master. Please tell me, where is this place? Could it be that we can't go back anymore?" "Don't worry, my servant. You don't have the right to know too much for now. If I were you, I would first deal with the enemy, and then come back to continue the previous topic." With that, Zhang Cheng raised his head and glanced at the battered and exhausted Boren. Under the almost suicidal attacks of the numerous demons, especially Hellfire, this unlucky fellow was now riddled with scars. Not only was one of his wings torn off, but his left arm and right leg were also in an extremely twisted shape. There is no need to ask to know that it was an extremely serious fracture. Even though demons were born with powerful recovery abilities and injuries, such as broken bones, could be restored to their original state in a few hours at most, he was currently outnumbered and had no time to recover. As you wish, master. Succubus Rin licked her seductive red lips, her eyes flashing with a dangerous glint. The next second, her figure quickly disappeared into thin air. Before Borun could react to what had happened, a whip flickering with cold light suddenly strangled his neck from behind. The barbs on the whip fiercely pierced into his flesh, and the more he struggled, the more pain he felt. And this pain was not only physical, but also mental and spiritual. Even the demons of hell who were good at endurance could not bear it, and screamed at the top of their lungs. Let me go. I surrender. Sorry, the Burning Legion never accepts captives. Rains tightened his grip on the whip as he bent down to give his prey a passionate kiss. In the blink of an eye, Borun, who was still in pain, revealed a glint of pleasure and enjoyment in his eyes. Although blood was gushing out of his neck like a fountain, he did not make any movements to resist. The powerful succubus relied on the power of shadow and charm spells to make the enemy surrender at her feet. Just as she was about to signal Doomsday Guardian Pollock to chop off the enemy's head, Borun's pale, yellow pupils suddenly flashed. Then he quickly broke free from the charm control, waved his sharp claws, and tore off the barbed whip. In one breath, he retreated more than 10 meters away. But what was interesting was that after breaking free, he did not run away. Instead, he roared angrily, very good. No matter who you are, you're all dead today. I, the great Borun, will grant you death. Death of pain and desire. It won't be long before you realize that in the face of the deepest evil of hell, any resistance is futile. As soon as his voice fell. Chapter 397. Deep, cold, evil, the black water was like silk. In just a few seconds, it had circled around Borun's feet, and several hellfire circles had entered it. Soon, the chilling liquid had sucked up the dark energy injected into the core of the hellfire. Without the energy supply, the hellfire collapsed and turned into a pile of black stones emitting strange heat. There is no doubt that the black water was not as simple as it looked. It was like a bottomless black hole, constantly absorbing all the energy it could touch, including Borun himself. Damn it, be careful. This thing is a bit strange. Rin felt the dark energy and shadow energy in her body being drained away. She quickly flapped her wings and retreated to a safe distance. Compared to most of her kind who like to rely on their powerful strength to crush their enemies, as a succubus, she was undoubtedly more cautious and would never try to fight head-on with an opponent she could not see through. Sneak attacks, charm, inciting opposition and betrayal, and disintegrating enemies that might pose a threat to the Legion from the inside was what they were best at. To some extent, the role of a succubus in the Burning Legion was very similar to that of a dreadlord, but not as powerful as the latter. Most of the time, it was the latter's supplement and subordinate. Relax, it's just some water from the sticks. It's nothing to be surprised about. As long as you don't approach it, the black liquid is not too harmful. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. He had systematically learned a lot about demons in the underground of the lamb slaughtered in Stormwind City. He knew very well that, even as an elite succubus, Rin would not take any risks. She might be a very good spy, a perfect interrogator, and a seducer who could corrupt most male creatures, but she would never be a qualified warrior or spellcaster. As for the Styx, it was a special river that separated heaven, hell, and earth from each other. It was recorded in ancient Greek mythology. It was said that the water of the Styx had many incredible powers. Anyone who tried to cross it, be it human, demon, angel, or anything else, would be instantly swallowed by the black water, and even their souls would slowly sink to the bottom of the river. After thousands of years of terrible erosion, these souls would eventually forget everything. They would only retain the most extreme emotions from when they were alive, such as anger, pain, despair, hatred, and so on. When hundreds of millions of them gathered together, they would form an extremely terrifying force. It was also because of the existence of the Styx that the three worlds had never had a full-scale conflict since the Ancient War. Even if there were occasional conflicts, they would try their best to resolve them through negotiation and negotiation. If they couldn't come to an agreement in the end, then they would use the most primitive duel to decide who was right and who was wrong. In fact, although the water of the Styx River was dangerous, it was not something rare. What really interested Zhang Cheng was the leather bag that contained the water. Not just any container could be used to store the water of the Styx. Containers such as glass, crystals, metals, and polymeric materials that were commonly used on a daily basis would all disintegrate instantly in front of the Styx. Until now, the Council hadn't been able to create any containers or materials that could be used to store the water of the Styx. This also meant that the dirty leather bag was likely to be something that appeared in some myths and legends. Seeing a large number of hellfires turn into piles of hot stones that were emitting black smoke, Borun's face showed a twisted and ferocious expression. He raised the water bag high and loudly chanted an unknown spell. When the strange syllables reached the highest point, the water of the Styx River that flowed like silk on the ground seemed to be controlled by a powerful force and directly rushed toward the nearest void walker, Tokak. Because he didn't receive any orders from his master, the huge blue fatty didn't have any intention of dodging and let the black liquid wrap around him. Soon, the shadow energy from the distorted space and time began to strangle the energy contained in the water of the Styx River. In just a minute or so, an incredible vortex appeared in his abdomen, and at the same time, it began to devour everything that came into contact with it, whether it was stones, soil, or Kupnik who didn't get far in time. No, no, save me, master. The imp let out an ear-piercing scream. He could feel that if he was really sucked in, it wouldn't only be his body and life that would disappear, but also his precious soul. I'm sorry, dear Kupnik. I can't help you. Besides, if you can't even take care of yourself, what's the use of having a servant like you? Zhangqing didn't care whether he lived or died. He just watched the vortex get bigger and bigger, and finally, everything, including Tokak, disappeared completely. If it weren't for the huge pit left on the ground, he would have thought that his eyes were hallucinating. Before Succubus could figure out what had happened, Borun let out a heart-wrenching cry. My water of the Styx River. How could my water of the Styx River be reduced so much all of a sudden? What kind of monster was that just now? Why could it devour the water of the Styx River? Obviously, the vortex just now had devoured more than 2/3 of the water of the Styx River, causing the black liquid that was originally like a ribbon to become only the length of a scarf. After all, this was his last trump card. Once it was used up, it meant failure. And failure was an absolutely unforgivable mistake in hell where the strong preyed on the weak. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Cheng took out the magic magnifying pocket watch from his pocket, raised his staff, and shot out a bone-piercing frost arrow. At the same time, he ordered without thinking, Rin, what are you waiting for? Grabbed the leather bag in his hand. As soon as his voice fell, a solid ice as thick as an adult's waist ruthlessly pierced toward Borun's chest. Just from the sharp tip of the ice arrow in front of him, it could be seen that if anyone was accidentally pierced, there was absolutely no chance of survival. Because at the moment of contact, the flesh and blood would be directly torn in half from the middle under the huge inertia and expansion force. Don't even think about it. Borun didn't even think about it. He immediately controlled the remaining water of the Styx River to block in front of him. The powerful frost arrow didn't even touch his skin before it was quickly devoured and decomposed by the black liquid. But before he could mock him, Succubus, who had been hiding for a long time, once again appeared out of thin air. This time, Rin's target was very clear. It was the dirty and inconspicuous leather container. So after using the whip to bind Borun's right hand, she immediately pulled out a dagger from her waist. A cold light flashed. Chapter 398. As the intense pain was transmitted to his brain through his nerves, Boric finally let out a scream like a pig being slaughtered. But despite the scream, he did not lose his mind. He immediately jumped up and tried to pick up his right hand that had fallen to the ground. as well as the leather water sack that he was holding tightly. But unfortunately, before he could get close, a sharp, two-handed greatsword fell from the sky and slashed down. Asterisk bang. Asterisk relying on its unbelievable strength, the Apocalypse Guard smashed a half-meter-deep ravine in the ground. Had it not been for Boric desperately flapping one of his wings to make a dodging movement, he would have been cut in half at the waist. After all, the material of the greatsword in Boric's hand was not ordinary metal, but the heavenly metal of planet Argus, the base of the Burning Legion. Its hardness was far beyond any metal that Zhang Cheng could come into contact with, and it also had a strong magic conductivity. When necessary, it could even inject evil energy into the sword. When the time came, the entire sword would burn with green, evil energy fire, and it could often behead behemoths that were far larger than it. It was precisely because of this that it became one of Zhang Cheng's most powerful fighters. To be precise, it was under the premise that it did not expose the dragon and the Death Knight. Feel the wrath of the Legion. The Apocalypse Guard did not succeed in its attack, so it immediately raised its goat-like hooves and stomped on the ground. Asterisk boom. Asterisk war trample. With the strength of its muscles and magic, the Apocalypse Guard stomped on the ground, creating the tragic effect of a battering ram hitting a city gate. Not only did the ground sink deeply, but the surrounding rocks also had spiderweb-like cracks. Boric only felt a buzzing sound in his head, and he suddenly lost his balance. His head directly came into contact with a huge granite rock not far away. The next second, the scream once again reverberated in the air above the stone bamboo forest. Boric waved the blazing greatsword and instantly cut the enemy's lower limbs below the knee into two pieces. At present, only Boric's left hand was intact, and it could be said that he had basically lost the ability to resist. However, the demons of the Burning Legion wouldn't give up on attacking just because of this. The narrow-minded succubus, in particular, swiftly swung his barbed whip and wrapped it around the opponent's left thumb. Then, he tugged hard and broke the finger. The hellhound Gazami was not to be outdone, opening its mouth full of sharp teeth and biting down on Borun's left arm, tearing it apart with all its might. In just half a minute, this hell demon, who could not live for another lifetime, had officially entered a critical state. In particular, when the hounds were biting, they were constantly extracting the remaining magic energy from the body, indirectly destroying the circulation and supply system that maintained Borun's survival. Seeing that the life force of this unlucky bastard was getting weaker and weaker, Zhang Cheng, who was studying the dirty leather water bag, could not help but stop him. Enough. Don't kill him. I still have use for it. As you wish, esteemed master. Boric pounded his chest and lifted his hoof to kick Gazami away. At the same time, he stared at Succubus with his green eyes. The latter quickly stopped tormenting Boric and retreated a few steps to ensure that he would not be cut by the terrifying greatsword. It had to be said that as the only mid-level officer of the Burning Legion, the Doom Sentinel was still very powerful in terms of deterrence. Other than the fact that he could not control the raging flames of rage in his heart, he was simply a perfect executor. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng carried the shriveled leather bag to Boric's side and asked with a smile, "Dear, tell me, what is this? As long as you tell me the truth, I will let you go." "Ha ha, who do you think I am? A fool among humans? I'm afraid that even an idiot wouldn't believe such a promise that has no guarantee and no binding force." The hellhound mocked with a maniacal laugh. Even though he was severely injured, his eyes still revealed a cruel and cunning glint. There was no doubt that this guy had not given up hope of survival. This was because he knew that as long as he could survive the following interrogation and torture and ensure that he did not reveal any secrets, the other party might sign a powerful, binding magic contract with him and save his life. As for whether the guy behind the scenes who planned everything would be unlucky, that was not within his consideration. Selfishness. This was an instinct that was deeply engraved in the depths of every hellhound's soul since birth. As a person who had traveled between two worlds, Zhang Cheng had undoubtedly seen many pairs of eyes. Some were mysterious, some were humble, some were arrogant, some were filled with endless ambition and desire, and some revealed vicissitudes and helplessness. But he had never seen such a pair of eyes that were so resolute, as though they believed from the bottom of their hearts that they could survive this calamity and obtain a new life. Obviously, ordinary torture would not have any effect on such a guy, and the remaining time was so tight. After about 3 to 5 minutes of hesitation, he finally squeezed out a smile and said, "All right, you win. I agree to sign a binding magic contract, but the prerequisite is that the terms must be set by me." That's right. That's it. There are no eternal enemies in this world. As long as there are enough benefits, yesterday's ally will be today's enemy. Similarly, yesterday's enemy can also be today's ally. Ignoring the pain from his wounds, Borik laughed loudly. There was no doubt that this hellhound knew that he had won the bet. Without any hesitation, Borik was afraid that the young human in front of him would suddenly change his mind. He quickly took out a contract with the mark of a demon monarch and quickly wrote more than 20 terms on it to ensure that the other party could not kill him under any circumstances. Zhangcheng did not hold back either. He added more than 50 terms, including revealing what had happened today in any form, the origin and use of the leather water sack, the name of the mastermind behind the scenes, and so on. Finally, he added a series of unfair enslavement terms. It could be said that as long as the contract was signed, Borik would have to obediently follow his orders for a long time, even becoming a traitor of hell. After a fierce debate, Borin successfully erased a few of the most threatening ones. Then he dipped himself in the acidic blood and signed his name at the end. As a hellhound, he knew very well that he was currently in an absolute disadvantageous position. He had no right to bargain at all. Once he got an inch and angered the other party, the consequences were likely to be death. Chapter 399. One wanted to obtain urgently needed information, while the other wanted to save his own life. Just like that, the two fellows who were enemies a few minutes ago finally signed their names on a magical contract that had a rather binding effect. One had to know that although the sovereigns of hell were sinister, cunning, cruel, and evil, they had always been meticulous in the execution of contracts. Even if it was their most trusted subordinates and direct descendants, they would not hesitate to kill them. Therefore, when the contract came into effect, Zhang Cheng was not worried that Borun would risk his life to inform the great demons of hell. On the contrary, not only would Borun not tell, but he would also do everything possible to ensure that what happened today would not be known by outsiders. Otherwise, once the content of the contract was discovered by another demon of hell, he would instantly become a traitor of hell. Not only would he not be able to climb up the ranks, but he might even have to flee to the fringe to escape being hunted down. Watching the sulfur-smelling parchment burn to ashes in the air, Borun's tensed nerves finally relaxed. He began to scrutinize the doomed sentinels, succubus, and hellhounds who were glaring at him covetously. After a long while, he stared with his two yellowed eyes and asked tentatively, "Are they really from the Burning Legion? Is there really an evil force in the universe that can rival hell?" "What do you think?" Zhang Cheng asked meaningfully. In fact, the history of this Earth, which was full of supernatural forces, was surprisingly similar to the Earth where Borun grew up. For example, both had experienced 2 world wars. After the war, the 2 superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States, dominated the global order. In the end, the superpower named the Soviet Union was the first to decline and split. Even many famous economic and political events were the same. But for some unknown reason, perhaps due to the secret suppression of the parliament, or perhaps it was a coincidence, the fantasy books, movies, and games that should have been released had not appeared so far. Whether it was The Lord of the Rings, which was known as the ancestor of fantasy, or the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop game rules that swept the Western market, all of them had inexplicably disappeared. Therefore, the things that were later created based on the above two, such as World of Warcraft, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Diablo, and so on, naturally no longer existed. Therefore, no one in this world knew of the famous Burning Legion on the other Earth. More interestingly, The witch trials that should have developed vigorously in the Dark Middle Ages also did not appear in this world. Instead, it was replaced by the Great Purge of Catholicism launched by the newly established Parliament. In order to restore the influence of heaven on the world of ordinary people, during the centuries from the Renaissance to the First Industrial Revolution, they continuously hunted and suppressed the churches around the world. They killed bishops with powerful supernatural forces and exposed and created scandals to incite people's rejection of religion. After the 20th century, the church, and the church, to the church. Zhang Cheng didn't intend to comment too much on the Parliament's actions in history, but he was concerned about the lack of fantasy books, games, and movies in this world. This meant that no matter if he used the magical knowledge and power system obtained from Azeroth or other places, he did not have to worry about enmity and panic. He also did not have to worry about anyone suspecting that he could travel between different fantasy worlds. Unfortunately, Borun did not know this. He kept looking at the succubus in front of him from the corner of his eye. He secretly compared the succubus with the same kind of female demons in hell who tempted mortals to fall. Finally, he came to a conclusion. Whether it was in terms of charm, scheming, or means, succubus was far superior to most of the female demons in hell who were born from lust. Therefore, he began to believe that the Burning Legion was real, and the young wizard standing in front of him was the spokesperson of this evil force. At the same time, he began to consider a full-scale invasion at some point in the future. After all, the reason why heaven, hell, and the Parliament did not break out in a large-scale war was because they were mutually restraining each other. Just like a stable triangular structure, if one side attacked the other, it was likely that a third party would take advantage of the situation. Under such circumstances, any leader with a little bit of rationality would choose to be patient for the time being. But now, an evil force called the Burning Legion had discovered Earth, and the unbreakable balance would soon disappear. Perhaps in the eyes of ordinary people, this meant the disappearance of peace, which meant the arrival of war and disaster. But in Borun's eyes, it meant chaos and opportunity, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Since the tragic war in ancient times, the limited positions of the demon monarchs in hell were almost completely dominated by the survivors of that time. If they did not die, the new demons born later would not have the slightest chance. But a full-scale war was enough to change this. He believed that once the evil force called the Burning Legion invaded Earth, it would inevitably cause a fierce reaction from the higher-ups of hell, especially the 7 great monarchs who boasted that they carried the original sin of mankind. They would never allow something more terrifying and evil than themselves to exist. At that time, as long as 1 or 2 of them died, there would inevitably be a huge power vacuum in hell. He could rely on the secret cooperation with the young man in front of him to realize the long-hidden ambition in his heart. The great monarch of hell, Borun. He liked it when people called out his name with such a resounding title. It had to be said that demons were really a very strange life form. It was as if from the moment they were born, they had an indescribable, strong ambition. Unless they died, they would never give up their desire for power and authority. Zhang Cheng saw the burning desire in his eyes and smiled indifferently. He once again raised the worn leather container in his hand and asked, "Now, tell me, what is it?" As you can see, it's a water bag, but the material used is a bit special, Borun replied with pursed lips. Material? Are you referring to this leather that exudes a strong aura of death? Zhang Cheng subconsciously frowned. That's right. I believe you should have heard of Greek mythology. The underworld king Hades had a hound with 50 heads called Cerberus. But later, this terrible monster was killed in the war in ancient times near the source of the river Styx. It is said that the terrible power of death polluted the nearby area, and anyone who came close, even if it was a dead soul, would be ruthlessly devoured. Many descendants with 3 heads were born from its corpse. They were the hounds of the underworld that the council had tamed in modern times. This water bag was made by a powerful ancient wizard who risked his life to cut a piece of leather from the corpse of Cerberus. It has the power to control the water of the river Styx. Chapter 400. The Leather of Cerberus? I see. Zhang Qing nodded thoughtfully. According to legend, this mountain-like beast would often wander around the Styx, killing any living person who tried to enter the world of the dead, or those who escaped from the world of the dead. In short, this famous dog was not afraid of the corrosion of the water of the Styx. It would not have a problem even if it jumped in for a bath, so it was not too strange that its skin could carry and control the water of the Styx. However, he did not understand. The magus who made this thing had the power to approach the corpse of Cerberus. He must have been a powerful existence at that time, but why was there no record of it in the history of the underground world? Although the council was officially established after the Black Death wreaked havoc in Europe, it was not a mass of scattered sand. The Magi, with a long history, had established a very loose alliance, responsible for dealing with the threats of hell and heaven. At the same time, they were responsible for recording the progress of the underground world after the Ancient War, ensuring that some precious information and trump cards were not lost. However, it could be seen from the dark Middle Ages that loomed over the heads of humans that this organization did not do a good job. As a selfish demon, Borun obviously did not care about the history of humans, unless there was a secret hidden in this history that could make him powerful. After a short pause, he stared at his limbs that were constantly regenerating while proudly showing off. I only extended my life by a year in exchange for this treasure from the terminally ill collector. With its power, I successfully got rid of many dangerous enemies. Humans are really complicated creatures. Sometimes they are extremely smart, but sometimes they are extremely stupid. But it belongs to me now, doesn't it? Zhang Cheng reminded with a smile that was not a smile. Of course, you are a powerful being, and the powerful dominate everything. This is the most basic common sense in hell. We have always revered the powerful from the bottom of our hearts. Not to mention, you have the support of a huge army behind you. Perhaps we can cooperate and benefit each other. What do you think? Borun hinted meaningfully. Betrayal and betrayal were as simple as eating and drinking to him. In the past 1,000 years, many of his kind had failed and died because of his meticulous schemes and machinations. Not only did the great demons not stop this, but they also encouraged it in a disguised way so that they could select the best subordinates to serve them. Hee, you are too impatient, my friend. Before we talk about this topic, answer me first. Who secretly opened the back door for you? And who wants to seize the fragment world? Zhang Cheng skipped the boring probing and asked directly. As time passed, he understood that he had to find out the true identity of the mastermind behind the scenes, and then use the little time left to do some preparation work. John, he's one of the members of the European Supreme Parliament and a powerful necromancer. Oh, by the way, he used another name a few hundred years ago. I'm sure you're not unfamiliar with it. Borun didn't beat around the bush and quickly gave the answer. Oh, what? Zhang Cheng showed an interested expression. As he had been paying attention to the movements of the underground world in North America, he did not know much about the European Parliament and had no idea who this so-called John was. Borun opened his mouth and uttered a name in an extremely slow manner. Faust! Faust! Zhang Cheng's pupils suddenly shrank. In this world, apart from the god of death and the god of the underworld in the legends, who had the deepest understanding of the power of death among the mortals, it had to be the necromancer named Faust. The German writer Goethe even used him as a model to create the famous poetic drama Faust, which was used to show the pursuit of European thought and spirit after the Renaissance. But the real Faust was not the fool who was tempted by the demon monarch, but a genius necromancer who passed the cruel trial at the age of 13. But he was not satisfied with the knowledge recorded in books. At the age of 15, he began to travel to every corner of the world with the age of navigation. Whether it was the ancient and mysterious rituals of Egypt or the techniques of African voodoo to control corpses, he learned them all. Through learning and referencing knowledge related to death, he deciphered the secret of death when he was not even 25 years old, and obtained immortality through an unknown method. At the age of 30, He could even awaken tens of millions of corpses in several cemeteries in a very short time and completely control them. After all, apart from the magical plague, which could only be created but not controlled, only the Lich King who wielded the divine equipment Frostmourne and wore the Helm of Governance could do such a thing. Resurrecting the dead was a very serious and delicate work. Most necromancers had to go through a series of tedious preparations before they could carefully resurrect one or two. Even a necromancer could only resurrect a dozen or 20 at most, and no more could be controlled. Zhang Cheng had once used the power of the magic plague in the Song of Ice and Fire world to turn hundreds of thousands of people from the living into the dead. He knew very well how difficult it was to control the dead creatures. It was not easy to control the low-level dead creatures because they had no thoughts. On the contrary, it was more difficult to make them obey the orders of their creators because they had no independent thoughts. Many times, the innate hatred for the living was enough to drive necromancers crazy. Of course, this was not the most terrible thing. The most terrible thing about Faust was that he was so arrogant that he led an army of the undead and raided the heart of the Catholic Church. The Vatican. Not only did they slaughter countless bishops who possessed powerful divine powers, but they also annihilated the last legion of angels stationed there. Not a single one of them managed to escape. Some people said that Faust died in that battle, while others said that he was afraid of being hunted down by heaven, so he changed his name and hid. Anyway, not long after this terrifying attack, he disappeared and never appeared again. Although Zhang Cheng had long known that the trial given by the parchment would not be easy, he never thought that the enemy he was going to face in the end would be so powerful and dangerous. No matter whether Faust was really as terrible as the legends said, there was no doubt that he was a very powerful enemy. Most importantly, he had no idea what his opponent's trump card was and what kind of spellcasting ability he had. Chapter 4:01. Interesting, a mix of intelligence, power, persistence, conceit, arrogance, and radical madman. After listening to Bohr's description of Faust, oh no, he had now changed his name to John, Zhang Cheng showed an interested expression. The reason was very simple. He could feel that Borak was in a similar state to himself to some extent. Especially when exploring the mysteries related to death, he would often lose self-control and fall into a state of near madness. However, what puzzled him was why this talented and dangerous fellow was hiding his true identity. What kind of unspeakable secrets were hidden behind? What was the purpose of seizing the fragment world? Did the members of the European Supreme Parliament know that he was the one who single-handedly flattened the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth project that took heaven nearly 2,000 years to build? One question after another kept echoing in Zhang Cheng's mind. But in any case, Borak was the biggest enemy he had to face in order to seize the fragment world. As for Borak, who had provided the information, he had long hidden in a corner to recuperate. At least, he would not show his face before the end of this horrible killing game. Just as Zhang Cheng was trying to find out the opponent's habits or weaknesses from the many rumors and clues, Doomsday Guardian Polak came to his side, bent down, and asked in a low voice, "Master, although I'm not very clear about the current situation, you can totally build a dark portal and summon a huge army from the distorted space and time to crush all the enemies. Build a dark portal? You think we can still connect to the distorted space and time? No, Polak. We are now in another universe, and many of the power rules have become different." Zhang Cheng gently shook his head and rejected his subordinate's suggestion. In fact, not to mention that he did not have the ability to build a dark portal. Even if he had the ability, he would not build one, because the power of the demonic tome alone could not control the high-level demons, such as the Dreadlord, the Lord of the Abyss, and the powerful Irida people who had absorbed the evil energy. And once the Burning Legion swarmed in, it was bound to trigger a terrible war. By then, who knew what would happen to Earth that was full of supernatural forces? Perhaps when the big countries with nuclear weapons found that they were unable to resist the invasion of the terrifying enemies, they would choose to detonate their nuclear weapons warehouses and directly let Earth enter the radiation wasteland mode. Don't be silly, Pollock. I've already tested it. This universe doesn't distort space-time at all. even a magic energy is of any kind that we know of. To put it simply, our honorable master has brought us to a place that the army can't detect. This is a huge crisis, but it's also an opportunity, Succubus Wren hinted as she licked her bright red lips. I saw the danger. Since we can't contact the distorted space-time, it means that we can't summon more soldiers. But what do you mean by opportunity? The Apocalypse Guard frowned and questioned loudly. Wren smiled and replied in a seductive voice. Of course, it's to absorb power and power. If we can't contact the army, it means that the army can't find us either. Under the leadership of Master, we can conquer and rule this planet, and then use it as a springboard to destroy heaven and hell. We can seize their technology and magic for our own use and form a brand new force. You want to betray the Legion? Pollock widened his eyes, revealing an undisguised surprise. To the demons, the so-called loyalty was just a bargaining chip in exchange for great power. Most of the demons of the Burning Legion were either lured into depravity by the dark taboo knowledge or succumbed to the overwhelming power of the Dark Titan Sargeras, his right-hand men, Kill Jaden, and the Arcarans. But no matter what, after glorious victories, the demons all believed that the Legion was invincible and that anyone who went against them would eventually be destroyed. Therefore, betrayal became an impossible thing. The Apocalypse Guard didn't dare to imagine how Deceiver Kill Jaden would react once he knew about this. Back then, the Orc Shaman Nazul's body was torn to pieces when he tried to escape. At the same time, his soul was sealed in ice and constantly tortured. Any demon who heard his screams couldn't help but tremble. Their hearts were filled with reverence and fear for Kill Jaden. Betray? No, my dear, it's not betrayal. I prefer to call it development. If the Legion discovers us one day in the future and we are not strong enough, then we will return to the Legion's embrace. I believe that Lord Kill Jaden will definitely reward us for what we have done. Succubus winked meaningfully. What if we are strong enough? An extremely serious expression appeared on Pollock's face. Isn't that simple? We will directly attack the conquering Legion. Let them become our soldiers and slaves. I believe that the great master will not disappoint us, right? After saying that, Succubus placed one hand on his chest and half knelt at Zhang Cheng's feet, his two breathtaking eyes bursting with strong ambition and desire. The Apocalypse Guard hesitated for a moment before also kneeling down and swearing. From today onwards, I am willing to temporarily leave the Legion and wholeheartedly pledge my loyalty to you. Seeing the final choice made by the two demons, Zhang Cheng nodded with satisfaction. Get up. I accept your loyalty. But your appearances are a little too conspicuous, so it's best to disguise yourself. No problem, my supreme master. Rin raised her slender arm and lightly touched her chest. In an instant, she changed from a demon with goat hooves, horns, and wings to a beautiful woman with long black hair. Even the skirt on her body changed out of thin air. In contrast, Pollock could only awkwardly stand in place and explain, "Sorry, master, I am not very good at disguise magic." "It's okay. I happen to have a few bottles of Phantom Potion here. Drink one first." After saying that, Zhang Cheng threw a bottle of dark green potion over. The latter did not say anything and directly opened his mouth, crushing the potion together with the bottle and swallowing it. In the blink of an eye, the huge Apocalypse Guard began to shrink slowly and finally stopped at a height of more than 2 meters. His terrifying muscles bulged as if they could burst the white shirt and black suit covering him at any time. As for his magic sword, it also shrunk to about 1.5 meters and was carried on his back. However, all of this was merely an illusion. Through the demon's eyes, Zhang Cheng could clearly see that whether it was Pollock or Ren, they still maintained their original appearance. They only used the help of magic to create an illusion that deceived sight, hearing, and touch. Chapter 402. A Signal to Gather? Urban Best, who was fighting against an unknown furry animal with 2 cute big eyes, raised his head and stared at the red light that streaked across the sky, a puzzled expression appearing on his face. Not long ago, the order he received was to kill all the creatures he encountered in the fragment world and obtain more colors from them. According to the plan, The killing should last for at least 8 to 12 hours. However, less than 2 hours had passed. Why did they suddenly change their mind? Meow. The unknown creature let out a cat-like cry. At the same time, its tail kept swaying left and right, as if questioning its opponent. Do you still want to fight or not? If you don't, I'm leaving. When Urban Best saw this scene, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He slowly put the 2 bronze antiques back into their sheaths. Then, he pulled out the lawbreaker that emitted a dark blue glow. Sorry, little thing. I'm in a bit of a hurry, so I can't continue playing with you. Now, you have 2 choices. One is to come with me, and the other is to be killed. As the last word fell, his whole body turned into a blur, instantly crossing a distance of nearly 20 meters. At a speed that was indiscernible to the naked eye, he stabbed the sharp blade in his hand toward the target's neck. High speed, precise, fatal. If it were a human or any other ordinary animal on Earth, their throats would have been slit by this attack. However, the moment the sharp blade touched the black furball's fur, it suddenly swelled without warning, turning into a huge fur ball with a diameter of more than 2 meters. With its outstanding elasticity, it forcefully sent Urban Best flying. As for its body being pierced by the lawbreaker, well, perhaps a ball-shaped creature the size of a soccer ball would die if it was pierced by a sword, but a fur ball with a diameter of 2 meters would at most be considered injured. It was far from death, especially when its body suddenly swelled, causing the pierced part to shift from its neck to its stomach. Moreover, this black furry creature wasn't completely powerless. At the very least, when it saw its opponent being sent flying, it immediately jumped up on the spot, tried to use its weight advantage to fiercely attack. After all, a meatball with a diameter of 2 meters weighed a few hundred kilograms. Coupled with the height and the acceleration of gravity, it could more or less break a few bones. If it was unlucky, its internal organs would rupture, and it would not be surprising if it died from excessive bleeding. Damn it, what a cunning little thing. Urban Best cursed in a low voice as he quickly turned around and dodged. At the same time, while the opponent was not paying attention, he grabbed the fluffy hair and used the spell breaker to block one of the big blinking eyes of the opponent. Perhaps it felt the chill from the tip of the sword. The black furry creature immediately stopped all movements and returned to its normal size. It opened its mouth and kept meowing. Are you begging for mercy? Urban Best was a little hesitant. Should he immediately kill this hateful little bastard, or should he bring him back to his lord? Suddenly, without any warning, a towering flame erupted not far away. Bang! Bang! 2 charred and smoking corpses fell from the sky and landed on the emerald green grass. Then, a muscular man with red skin walked out from behind the huge mushroom unhurriedly. He sneered and said sarcastically, "Idiot! How dare you attack me? He must be tired of living. Bram, who were the 2 guys you killed?" Urban Best glanced at the charred corpses and frowned. "I'm not sure, but they tried to sneak up on me from behind when I was seizing the colors. In addition, I also found something interesting. The colors they collected when they died were all transferred to me. This means that we can use the remaining time to hunt down the subordinates of other lords." Interesting. Too interesting. Ha 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 ha. Urban Best opened his arms and laughed loudly. Without a doubt, compared to killing all kinds of strange creatures, he obviously preferred killing humans. Only the blood of powerful humans could satisfy his strong desire. That's right. I think so too. The muscular man with red skin cracked open his mouth and revealed a cruel and tyrannical smile. Obviously, he was none other than the other knight under Zhang Chung, Bram Chalice. Just as the 2 men were about to continue talking, the battered and exhausted Jesse Livermore came out from the mushroom forest and gritted his teeth as he complained, F***CK. Today is really unlucky. Take a guess. What did I encounter just now? What? Urban Best blinked his eyes cooperatively. An angel. A living angel. What the F***CK? I saw that B***TCH kill more than 50 people, including 2 lords. As she spoke, Jessie's entire body was trembling slightly. There was no need to ask to know that she was definitely frightened. After all, An underworld resident like her, who could awaken and control the undead, had always been viewed as an enemy by the forces of heaven. During the expansion of religion in the Dark Middle Ages, she would be killed on the spot if she was discovered. Angel, are you sure you didn't see wrongly? A faint red light flashed in Bram Chalice's pupils. Jesse rolled his eyes in annoyance. Nonsense. If I didn't run fast enough, I would be a corpse now. I see. I think I know why Sir Overlord sent the summon signal in advance. According to the time given by the Council, the angels and demons should enter the fragment world in 2 days. It's very likely that something has happened. Urban Best touched his chin and calmly analyzed. Angels? Demons? I want to see if they are as strong as the legends say. Before Bram could finish his words, a dazzling golden beam of light descended. The next second, boom, Bram was crushed by the terrifying energy and sprawled on the ground. His demonic red skin was constantly emitting sizzling sounds as if it was being burned by flames. Damn it, she's coming. Accompanied by Jesse's frightened cry, a blonde woman with indescribable beauty flew past the mushroom forest. Her white wings and endless majesty proved her identity. She was an angel from heaven. Oh, this isn't good. Jesse, hurry up and send the signal flare. I'm not sure how long I can block her. Urban Best reminded without turning his head. As for himself, he had already tensed up and was ready to fight with his life on the line. As a hunter, he knew better than his 2 companions how powerful and troublesome an angel was. Chapter 4:03. Filthy, unclean, you need to be purified by the most sacred light from heaven. Shamir shouted the most commonly used battle cry, putting on a coat of righteousness for the slaughter she was about to start. She swooped down from the sky, intending to use the extra power generated by her speed to directly cut the man in front of her into 2 halves. As an angel, her almost perfect body was not only beautiful, but the power it contained was far from what an ordinary person could compare with. Not to mention a body of flesh and blood. Even if it was a piece of pure steel, the result would not be any different. Wow, a crazy killing angel. How terrifying. Urban Best curled up the corner of his mouth and ridiculed. He did not hesitate to turn sideways to avoid the long sword flickering with golden light. At the same time, he held out Spellbreaker, intending to open a small hole in her body to let out blood. Although he pretended to be very scared, his eyes revealed a completely opposite excitement. That's right, it was excitement. He clearly enjoyed the intense thrill of brushing shoulders with death. How dare you? Seeing the magic blade flickering with dark blue light piercing into her skin, Shamir's expression instantly changed. She could not care less about maintaining her high and mighty posture and hurriedly made continuous rolling movements, barely avoiding the danger of her intestines being cut open. Unfortunately, she had neglected the tip of Spellbreaker, which was hidden by the light refraction ability of Spellbreaker. As a result, from the left side of her waist to her lower abdomen, there was a wound that was half a finger deep. Her angelic skin, which was comparable to a full body armor, did not hinder it at all. It was like butter being cut by a knife, and golden blood flowed out continuously from the wound, showing no signs of healing at all. Magic weapon. Shamir glanced at the wound, unable to hide the surprise on her face. Urban Best smiled and nodded. Yes, her name is Morris Spellbreaker, a magic sword that can dispel any magic defense. Please be careful. Once she pierces the heart or brain, even an angel will die. Arrogant mortal, do you think you still have a chance to stab me? Shamir raised her left hand that was flickering with golden light and covered the wound. In the blink of an eye, the wound that was not very serious disappeared without a trace, not even leaving a scar. No, madam, you seem to have misunderstood something. I don't need to defeat or kill you. I just need to buy some time. Please believe me, when you meet the Lord, you will realize that dying under my sword is actually a form of happiness and relief. After saying these meaningful words, Eben Bast instantly disappeared from where he stood. Without waiting for Shamir to react, he took advantage of his speed to launch a barrage of attacks. Attack! 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 There were no gaps. He didn't give his opponent any time to catch his breath, this man, who only had speed, used his actions to prove that as long as he trained and worked hard, even the most inconspicuous ability could cause a great deterrence to a powerful enemy. Oh my God, this is what Arabin looks like when he goes all out? Jessie gaped at the hundreds of afterimages in front of him. She simply could not believe that this was a speed that a human body could reach and endure. It had to be known that while a human's body looked strong and sturdy on the surface, the various joints were extremely fragile. This was especially so when one suddenly changed direction while running at high speeds. The slightest carelessness would cause severe strain and sprain, and it was not uncommon for bones and joints to shatter. But now, Arabin had clearly made over 100 high-speed turns in just a few minutes, and yet he showed no signs of being injured. As for Shamir, who was being attacked, she no longer had the time to care about anything else. She was fully focused on defending herself. With her rich combat experience, she knew that such a terrifying attack would not be able to last long, let alone immortal. As long as she defended her vitals, it would not take long for her opponent to collapse from exhaustion. Just as the angel had expected, the attack lasted for less than 3 minutes before Arabin began to slow down. His entire body was emitting white steam, as though he had just come out of a steamer. His skin and muscles were an unhealthy dark red, like a cooked crab with its mouth wide open for fresh air. Have you reached your limit? Even if you're only able to do this because of that powerful magical weapon, you're still a worthy opponent. Shamir completely ignored the countless wounds on her body, raising a golden longsword made of heavenly metal and performing a sword salute. Hee, should I feel honored, Miss Angel? The exhausted Arabin chuckled lightly, not caring about his own life or death. Shamir nodded matter-of-factly. That's right. You should feel proud. You know, if you were just a little bit faster, you could have pierced through my defenses and killed me. I wouldn't even have been able to retaliate. Just a little bit faster? I understand now. With that last word, Arabin fell to the ground with a thud, unconscious. Interesting mortal. If it were any other occasion, I might have spared your life. What a pity. With that, Shamir stabbed her long sword towards her opponent's heart. Wraithbind. Jesse naturally could not watch as his companion was killed. He quickly raised his arm and made a grabbing motion. Instantly, 2 pale hands reached out from the black fog, grabbing the angel tightly, preventing her from stabbing out with her sword. Oomph. What a boring little trick. Shamir's body emitted a golden light, and the pale hands seemed to have met their natural enemy, dissipating along with the black fog. Just as she raised her sword once more, intending to kill Arabin, who was a huge threat to her, a whip suddenly appeared out of thin air, strangling her neck from behind. Following that, a 2-handed greatsword burning with green flames descended from the sky, forcing her to raise her weapon to parry. Mortal strike! With a furious roar, the 2 magic longswords finally clashed against each other. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, the golden magical weapon in the angel's hands broke into 2. Not only that, a crack appeared on the ground from the terrifying strike of the greatsword. Shamir did not fare any better. Her chest and abdomen were completely split open, revealing her muscles, blood vessels, and organs, especially the green, evil fire, which incinerated everything around her. The shadows will devour you. Foolish creature, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, you will eventually submit to the master. Fall and join a new army. Everything you desire is here. Chapter 404. No, no, no. What did you do to me? Sensing a dark energy forcefully invading her core, Shamir let out a cry of pain and despair. Although angels looked similar to humans on the outside, they were completely different on the inside. To be exact, their brain, heart, and magic power storage organs were all concentrated in a small core, and this core was the angel core, located in the center of their chest. As long as the core was not destroyed, no matter how serious the damage was, the angel could slowly gather energy and revive. But if the core was seriously damaged, it would be a 100% death. If it was contaminated, it would most likely lead to a terrible fall. In history, many demons had used this point to capture newborn angels who were less than 100 years old. Through seduction, humiliation, torture, abuse, and so on, they contaminated the angel cores, causing them to inadvertently degenerate and eventually become the claws of the great demons. Otherwise, where did so many fallen angels in hell who loved to enjoy and kill come from? Of course, heaven was not a fool. It quickly formulated countermeasures and let a powerful archangel lead a few newborn angels to carry out the mission. This way, the demons would have to consider the consequences if they wanted to do anything. But unfortunately, in the fragment world that was isolated from the outside world, there would be no archangel to save Shamir. So, in less than 10 minutes after the dark force was injected into the core, a large number of black spots began to appear in her golden pupils, and her white wings were also constantly darkening. Haha, great. That's it. Don't resist, my dear baby. Accept it and embrace it. Believe me, it will bring you endless strength and happiness. Ren whispered seductively into the angel's ear. As a succubus, she could clearly feel that the resistance in the heart of this winged humanoid creature in front of her was getting weaker and weaker. Unlike the fierce and domineering evil energy, the dark force was a kind of energy that came from the distortion of time and space. It was more evil, hidden, and had unimaginable erosion and assimilation abilities. In the blink of an eye, Shamir's shining golden angel core quickly dimmed and was replaced by a deep blue-purple color, like a rare purple sapphire. However, not only did this sapphire not reflect light, but it also absorbed the light around it, forming a strange dark vortex in the center. When Ren saw this, she immediately loosened the whip around her slender neck and retreated to the side to observe silently. After all, today was the first time she came into contact with an angel. Judging from the power system the angel used, it seemed to be very similar to one of the enemies of the Burning Legion, Neru, but there seemed to be some differences. Now that she was observing the entire process of an angel's fall from a close distance, she would undoubtedly be able to solve some mysteries. Thus, she did not interfere further. On the other side, Doom Guardian Polak also didn't intend to continue attacking. There wasn't even the slightest expression on his serious face. It was because Shamir was too weak, so weak that he was not interested in her at all. In any case, the representatives sent by heaven and hell were not high-level combatants. If not for Polak's skin that could control the water of the Styx, he alone could crush both of them at the same time. It was challenging, but not powerful. At least compared to the Burning Legion that had countless dreadlords, abyssal lords, Irida, Sylvanas, and other high-level demons, it was a little weak. Not to mention, there was also the deceiver Kill Jaden who commanded the entire legion, and the Dark Titan Sargeras who destroyed the Pantheon. This was Polak's evaluation of the forces of heaven and hell. At least, before he saw a more terrifying power with his own eyes, he would not easily change his judgment. At the same time, the dark force was still eroding Shamir. Although the female angel tried to resist with the last of her rationality, the fall was inevitable. As the white feather turned black, her golden pupils were finally swallowed by the darkness. The painful screams gradually stopped, and an expression of enjoyment appeared on her face. Splash, splash, splash. Every time the core flickered, it would continuously inject new shadow energy into her body. In less than a minute, the huge wound on her chest had healed rapidly. Following that, black lines began to appear on the surface of her fair skin. Among them, the lifelike butterfly-shaped lines near her eye sockets added a touch of charm out of nowhere. This feeling. It's amazing. Shamir spread her black wings and let out a asterisk sound that would make any man blush. Hee, tell me, who are you? Succubus came closer and gently lifted her thin chin. I am Shamir, a fallen angel of shadow, the messenger of darkness and death. As she spoke, the female angel raised her right hand and released a ball of flame that was completely made of dark force. It had to be said that although she had fallen, Her core had been completely eroded and assimilated by the dark force. Not only did her power not weaken, but it also increased greatly. Very good. Come, meet your new master. From today onwards, you are her loyal servant. Ren pulled Shamir's hand and came before Zhang Cheng, who had been standing not far away for a long time. The latter first sized her up, then quickly frowned and asked, "A human? Why? Are you dissatisfied with humans?" Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile. "Idiot! Hurry up and kneel." Succubus lashed out with his whip. Slap! A bloodstain suddenly appeared on the fallen angel's slender thigh. "Don't be so rough. She just wants to see my power." Zhang Cheng raised his hand to stop Ren from lashing out. He lowered his head and took off his contact lenses, revealing his demonic eye that was emitting a terrifying green light. In an instant, an indescribable evil began to spread in all directions. Fear, trembling, despair. Shamir only felt as if she had been immobilized. Her brain had completely lost control of her body. In the end, she knelt on the ground with a plop, her eyes filled with horror. She never thought that a mere human would have such a terrifying eye. It was as if it had directly pierced through her soul, injecting fear and evil into the depths of her soul. After the contact lenses covered the demonic eye again, she, who had regained her ability to move, immediately grabbed Zhang Cheng's right hand and deeply kissed one of the magic rings on the back of his hand. "I apologize for my rudeness, Master. From today onwards, I am your most loyal servant." Chapter 405. Someone once said that the way to win was to be one step ahead, then step by step, and finally leave the opponent far behind. Although Zhang Cheng could not fully understand the profound meaning of this sentence for the time being, he also knew how to use all the available resources around him to give a big gift to the real enemy that was about to arrive. And Shamir was the most crucial part of this plan. No one knew what order he gave to the fallen angel. They only knew that when Shamir left, with the help of the magic potion, she had already recovered her white wings and golden pupils. Except for a trace of arrogance between her eyebrows from time to time, everything was no different from before she fell. As for the long sword made of metal unique to heaven, after being tempered by the evil fire, it became two short swords or daggers, about 50 centimeters long and engraved with demonic runes. Any unlucky person who was stabbed or cut would be continuously burned by the evil fire. The pain was not something that ordinary people could endure. What was more frightening was that with the help of the 20 connected demonic runes, the dark energy would also enter the opponent's body, like a gangrene attached to the bone, and have an irreversible negative impact on the will. For example, the heart would become darker and darker, and the way of thinking would become more and more selfish. All kinds of desires that were usually suppressed would sprout out of the ground like bamboo shoots after a rain. It could be said that the original design concept of these two short weapons was not for direct combat, but for launching a sudden sneak attack to inject more dark energy into the core of the angel. Through observing the process of Shamir's fall, Zhang Cheng found that as she was completely devoured by the dark energy, there were some interesting changes in the surroundings. For example, the mysterious energy that originally filled the air suddenly had a little bit of dark energy. Although it was just a little bit, it was an incredible surprise for him. Ever since he officially came into contact with magic knowledge, he had constantly tried to absorb and manipulate this energy in different ways, but the results were minimal. Because the magic energy in this world was neither the well-known 6 major systems of Azeroth, nor was it the elemental energy brought by the mysterious Crimson Comet in the Song of Ice and Fire world, he could not find any breakthrough at all before obtaining the ancient knowledge of the local wizards. But today, after witnessing the whole process of the angel's fall, Zhang Cheng finally found another shortcut, which was to borrow the chicken to lay the eggs, and use the forces of heaven and hell to create the magic energy that he was familiar with. As everyone knew, whether it was the dark energy or the dark energy, they were not energy systems that were born out of thin air. One of them came from the deepest part of the distorted space and time to pollute the astral soul, and the other was a new system born from the Dark Titan's terrifying power to forcibly distort and pollute other energy. No matter which one of them, they had the terrifying attribute of devouring and changing other energy to strengthen themselves. If he used dark energy to transform the demons of hell and used shadow to create a large number of fallen angels, wouldn't this world gradually to become interesting? In addition, as the source of the two types of energy, be it Zhang Cheng himself, the Doom Guards, or the succubi, they would all obtain unimaginable benefits from this infiltration. The most intuitive thing was that when the concentration of dark energy in the air increased, they would inevitably become more and more powerful, especially the two demons of the Burning Legion. They might even evolve into terrifying demon kings like Archimonde and kill Jaden. Of course, it was still a little too early to think about this now. Zhang Cheng needed to get through the current crisis first. After watching the fallen angels disappear into the horizon, Jesse Livermore, who had been holding back for a long time, could not help but ask, "Boss, who are they? Are they your newly recruited knights?" They? Zhang Cheng glanced at the Apocalypse Guard and Succubus, who were disguised as humans, and replied with a smile, "No, they are not knights. They are just my servants." Servants? Damn it. Why didn't I know you had such terrifying servants? Also, how did they come in? This is a fragment world. Jesse obviously did not believe a word of what he had just said. Relax. Everyone has their own little secrets, and I am no exception. Well, don't ask too much. I will tell you what you need to know, but there are some things you'd better not ask and not know too much. This is good for both of us, isn't it? After saying that, Zhang Cheng ignored the slightly neurotic young lady and walked to Bram, who had no intact skin on his body. How does it feel to be crushed by absolute power? It sucks. I never knew that an angel's ability could restrain my bloodline so much. Bram struggled to get up from the ground but failed in the end. The terrifying light beam had not only burned his skin, but also part of his muscle tissue. Even the regenerative ability that he was proud of had been restrained to a certain extent. Then tell me, do you crave power? Even if it is full of destruction and tyranny? Zhang Cheng tempted with a smile. Although the other party was only a human suspected of having the bloodline of hell, he still wanted to know what kind of interesting changes would occur after injecting dark energy. The more knowledge and power he grasped, the more he understood why so many powerful mages eventually embraced darkness, evil, and death. Because no matter which path it was, the final destination belonged to the forbidden domain. It was the supreme truth that transcended life and death, the soul, and the gods. This process required a large number of experiments that were insane in the eyes of ordinary people. It required the deaths of hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of people as the price. The so-called human nature, emotions, and conscience were just beautiful scenery on the journey. They might stop for a short while to appreciate it, but not long after, they would abandon them and continue on their journey. For a person who desired to surpass everything, nothing could stop them except for their own death. Without a doubt, Bram felt this from Angeli's deep eyes. He opened his mouth and laughed maniacally. "Ha ha 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 ha! My lord, are you trying to do some terrible transformation on me?" "That's right. After all, you are too weak. So weak that you can't even deal with an angel. How can you complete the mission I gave you?" Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer. "If that's the case, then what are you waiting for? Let's get started. Compared to being weak and pathetic now, I'd rather be devoured by a powerful and evil force." Bram unexpectedly did not refuse. Instead, he chose to accept it. "Polak, give him a seed of dark energy." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips into a playful smile and beckoned to the demon guard not far away. The demon guard did not say a word. He stretched out his finger and gently tapped on Bram's chest. Instantly, a dazzling green light was injected into the heart. In the blink of an eye, the light spread throughout the body, along with the blood, through the madly beating heart. Chapter 406. In less than 5 minutes, this man, who had no intact skin on his body, began to undergo astonishing changes. First, the color of his blood. Due to the injection of dark energy, part of his blood turned from red to green, while the other part maintained its original color. As a result, the two mixed together, causing his muscles to show an abnormal dark purple color. Secondly, due to the dark energy activating part of his bloodline power, many parts of his body, such as his shoulders and arms, showed signs of demonization. Especially his tail, which was constantly growing and thickening behind his butt, was the best proof. Finally, and most importantly, the color of his pupils was constantly switching between pale yellow and dark green. Obviously, Bram's Hell bloodline was desperately trying to stop or resist the invasion of the dark energy. So his body was now a huge battlefield. Many parts of his body were torn, healed, torn, and healed due to the violent conflict between the two energies. The pain was definitely beyond the limit of what an ordinary person could endure. Looking at the frantically struggling Bram, Jessie subconsciously shuddered. She muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear, "Oh, God, this is just too scary. I hope he can survive. Hee hee, little cutie, do you want me to give you a seat of power? I guarantee that the entire process will not be painful at all. On the contrary, you will experience extreme happiness." The succubus Rains had appeared behind her at some point and was whispering seductively into the young lady's ear. "Me? No, thank you, beautiful. Also, I like men, not women, so please keep a safe distance." Jessie shuddered and hurriedly backed away, staring at the other party with a vigilant look, because in that moment, she could clearly feel her heart beating faster. It was as if she had returned to the first time she kissed her first boyfriend when she was 15 years old. Although she didn't know exactly what had happened, she knew that this was definitely not normal, especially for someone like her who was straight. "Relax, I also like men, but that doesn't affect me liking women at the same time, right? Trust me, gender is never the most important thing. What's important is the pleasure, the process of enjoyment." Ren used her magical voice to distract Jessie as she quietly closed the distance between them, trying to use a seductive kiss to get the girl in front of her. There was no doubt that she, who had tasted the sweetness of it, desired to inject more shadow energy into the bodies of more people. When the amount exceeded a certain number, she would truly be the Shadow Queen. Unfortunately, just as their lips were about to touch, Zhang Cheng suddenly stopped them. "Enough. Don't touch her. Shadow isn't the most suitable power for her. Damn it. Consider yourself lucky." Without any hesitation, Succubus immediately gave up on charming Jessie. The latter immediately came to his senses and shouted in horror, "You control my thoughts." "Umph." Ren curled her lips in disdain. She had no intention of explaining. Perhaps in her eyes, Jessie was just a lowly mortal. Since he could not be used as a tool, he naturally had no value. Demons had never been kind to things that had no value. Not killing them was already the embodiment of extreme benevolence. "Do you think he has a chance to absorb the dark energy?" Zhang Cheng ignored the young lady who was at a loss as to what to do and turned around to ask Polak. The Apocalypse Sentinel hesitated for a moment with a blank expression before shaking his head. "It's hard to say. From a physical point of view, he should be able to withstand the violent power of the dark energy. But I'm not sure if his mind can withstand such immense pain. You should know that even if it's a sorcerer, nearly 2/3 of them will give up on the first contact with the dark energy. Yes, there's a price to pay to obtain power. The more powerful the power, the heavier the price to be paid. Forget it. Looking at his condition, I'm afraid there won't be any results for at least a few hours. Let's do something else first." Zhang Cheng sighed. "What are you going to do next?" Polak asked with great interest. "Of course, to hunt the Flame Queen. When Shamir starts killing in the image of an angel, those lords will definitely notice that there's a problem with the war game. By then, they will definitely choose to gather together to discuss countermeasures. What we need to do is to use the time difference to gather the most powerful colors in this fragment world." After saying that, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with undisguised mockery. Because from this moment on, everyone, including Catherine, the Desire Witch, would become his chess pieces and cannon fodder against a powerful enemy. The feeling of holding the fate of others in the palm of his hand was like a deadly poison. It was pleasurable and addictive. Understood. Ugh, what about this little thing? Kill it? Pollock lowered his head and glanced at the ball-shaped black, furry creature at his feet. Meow. Furball seemed to have noticed the terrifying power of the Apocalypse Sentinel and was so frightened that it immediately let out a nervous cry. What is this? A cat? Zhang Cheng grabbed Furball in his hand and kneaded it. After a while, he discovered that this interesting creature was not a cat at all, but it was even more interesting than a cat. People often said that cats were actually a kind of liquid, because no matter how small the space or container, they would stuff themselves into it. However, this little animal was more liquid than a cat. To be exact, it did not have a fixed form at all. It could be stretched, squashed, enlarged, and shrunk as it wished. It would not bleed, even if it was pierced by sharp weapons, and would heal itself in a few seconds. Moreover, it did not have a temper and would not get angry no matter how one played with it. It was furry and felt very good. After ravaging this unknown little animal for 5 minutes, Zhang Cheng placed it on his shoulder in satisfaction and directly announced, "From now on, it's my pet." Pet! The corner of Jessie's mouth twitched. At the same time, she madly ridiculed her boss in her heart. "You're so brazenly raising a creature from a fragment world. Aren't you afraid of attracting trouble?" Although that furry ball looked really cute, she also wanted to hug it and ravage it. Knowing that time was pressing, Zhang Cheng did not stay in the same place to wait for his last subordinate, Patty, to return. After making some simple preparations, he led Apocalypse, Sentinel Pollock, and Hellhound Gazami toward the Flame Castle. He believed that with Gazami's spell seal, devour, and his own powerful magic resistance, he would definitely be able to smoothly take down that interesting elemental life form. Once he seized the most powerful red, he would be able to see through the secrets hidden behind the appearance. Chapter 407. More than 10 hours later, at the intersection of the swamp and the snowy mountains in the northwest of the Fragment World, the desire which Catherine stared at the enemy with a gloomy expression. After 2 or 3 minutes, she sneered and said, "I didn't expect that there would be a day when we would work together." "Why not? Don't you always like to play games with your enemies and friends? When a greater threat appears, we can temporarily work together, even if it's an enemy. This is the principle that you taught me." Cain bowed with a smile on his face. From his face, there was no sinister intention to kill her. It was as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other in a long time. Perhaps after decades of patience, he had gotten used to hiding this hatred. He wasn't like an impulsive young man who couldn't wait to attack when they met. That's right. An angel is indeed a big threat. But what I'm really concerned about is the conspiracy behind this. Don't forget that the Parliament promised to give the Brooklyn Lords 2 days to prepare. But now, only 24 hours have passed. Don't you think it's strange? Catherine didn't beat around the bush and directly revealed her intentions. As a witch who is good at playing with people's desires, she could instinctively feel a pair of eyes staring at her in the darkness. Kay nodded seriously. It's very strange. Normally, the entrance to the Fragment World is controlled by the European Parliament. Whether it's an angel or a demon, it won't be easy for them to enter unless someone purposely goes easy on them. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but although this angel is constantly attacking, she doesn't fight too much. Once she enters a stalemate, she will definitely choose to retreat. It seems like she's purposely herding everyone together. So what do you think her goal is? To gather us together and kill us all? Purple light flashed in Catherine's eyes. Anyone who knew a thing or two about her would know that this was a sign that the desire which was at the peak of her anger. They all stepped back and kept a safe distance from her. Sorry, I'm not too sure yet. Before the other party reveals her true identity, there's no way to judge. Perhaps the mastermind wants to use hell and heaven to weaken us, or perhaps they want to seize the Fragment World. In short, the only thing we can do now is to form an alliance and ensure that we don't give the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of us by fighting and killing each other. With that, Cain reached out his right hand. I agree. Catherine hesitated for a moment before reaching out her right hand to shake his. As the two old enemies shook hands and made peace, the Lord and his subordinates for Brooklyn New York, finally put aside their differences and temporarily united to prepare for the upcoming crisis. However, they did not know that while they were conversing, the Flame Queen who ruled the southern part of the fragment world had finally died in the Flame Castle. Looking at his flame-like hand that had completely elemental transformed after absorbing the most powerful red, Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a hint of understanding. He smiled and sighed, so that's how it is. The so-called color is actually just a kind of control authority given by the Fragment World Core. Whoever obtains, it will be like a game administrator who has obtained the authority to change all the physical and magical rules around them according to their own will. Just like this. As soon as he finished speaking, the castle, which was originally emitting red flames like lava, instantly began to cool down. In less than a few seconds, only black, scorched earth was left. But this was only the beginning. After a while, the ground in the center of the castle suddenly shook and rumbled like thunder. In the next second, boom, the entire ground was broken through by a powerful force from the bottom up. Hot lava spewed out as if it was free. In the blink of an eye, the castle was completely submerged in the process of the volcanic eruption. Feeling the rich fire elements permeating the air, Zhang Cheng could not help but smile and mutter to himself, "Red, the color of life, the color of flames. Just the control authority is already so amazing. If it's the Fragment World Core, how powerful will it be? I'm really looking forward to it." Just as he wanted to test the limits of this power, Apocalypse Guard Polak suddenly came to his side and reminded him in a low voice, "Master, a new guest has arrived." Oh! Hearing this, Zhang Cheng hurriedly raised his head. Sure enough, he found that far to the north, the sky was pierced by a white beam of light. There was no doubt that this was a large-scale teleportation spell. Judging from the energy unintentionally emitted, there were at least 1,000 people. Teleporting 1,000 people at once? And it's not the stipulated time yet? He instantly realized that this was most likely a guy hiding in the dark who could not help but take action in advance. Thus, he immediately stood up and instructed the Apocalypse Guard. "Let's go and take a look." "Just the two of us." Polak was obviously stunned. As for the Hellhound and the Black Furball at the side, he simply ignored them. "Don't worry, we're just going to take a look. Believe me, some people can't sit still anymore. They'll complete the first test for me." As the last word fell, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Two wings completely composed of flames grew out of thin air and brought him and his subordinates to the location of the incident. In less than 15 minutes, the two men and one dog arrived at the periphery of the teleportation beam of light. On the open grassland, there were densely packed groups of people looking for their prearranged teammates. They did not look like they were in the same group. However, among these people of different appearances, there was a strange young man wearing a white monk's robe who stood motionless in the same place. His left hand pressed on a huge coffin, and a cold smile appeared on his pale face. Fortunately, there were always many strange people in the underground world, so his abnormality did not arouse too many people's vigilance. However, in Zhang Cheng's eyes, the terrifying death energy emitted by the coffin was simply like boiling water, constantly spreading in all directions. Before he recovered from his shock, the young man wearing the white monk's robe suddenly opened his mouth and chanted in Latin, "God of death, the ruler from the underworld, the reaper of mortal souls, I beg you to kill all the enemies." "As you wish," after a deep, hoarse, and chilling voice reverberated in the air, the coffin suddenly released dense black smoke. Immediately after, a void figure holding a huge scythe and wearing a tattered black robe appeared out of thin air in front of everyone. It did not even say a word of nonsense and directly waved the ferocious and terrifying weapon in its hand. More than 100 people in front of it fell to the ground with a plop, turning into pale and ice-cold corpses. Chapter 408. Soul Attack. Polak's pupils constricted. As a mid-level commander of the Burning Legion, he had been through hundreds of battles and was never afraid of powerful opponents, even the heroes and demigods of Azeroth who had humiliated the Burning Legion. But today, in the face of a direct soul attack, He felt a tremor and fear from the depths of his soul. There was no pain, no blood. There was no collision between steel and power. There was only one judgment, a comparison of the quality of the soul. Then the strong devoured the weak. Zhang Qing's expression also became serious. He lowered his voice and explained, "No, it's not just a soul attack. There's also the power of death. What's in that coffin? I'm afraid it's not ordinary." "You mean God?" The Doom Sentinel's tone was full of uncertainty. After conquering countless worlds with the Burning Legion, he had seen at least a few hundred gods, and the difference in strength was like heaven and earth. Among them, the powerful ones were like the titans of the pantheon, who could easily destroy a world with a wave of their hand. The weak ones were even weaker than the demigods of Azeroth. The only thing he could be sure of was that all life forms that were called gods often had extremely strong vitality and absolute control in certain areas. For example, the king of the forest, Cenarius, could awaken the trance and use thorny vines to restrict the movement of his enemies. He could even draw magic from nature and release the rain of tranquility that could heal all wounds. It could be said that as long as there was a large forest around him, he would have inexhaustible power. "I don't know. Let's observe for a while first." Zhang Qing shook his head noncommittally. He didn't think that the black shadow carrying a huge scythe was the legendary Grim Reaper, even if it looked very similar to the Grim Reaper in the Western world. Because according to the historical process, the classic image of the Grim Reaper with a scythe was first born in the 13th tarot card, corresponding to the astrological sign Pluto. And the tarot cards were not born in the mythological era. According to the records of the underground world, it should have been learned from somewhere in Egypt by the wandering gypsies in the Middle Ages. This also meant that the classic image of the Grim Reaper was unlikely to be a true god. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be an undead life form created by powerful necromancy magic. Just as his mind was filled with all kinds of questions, the young man in the white monk's robe suddenly raised his hands and laughed wildly to the terrified crowd. "Ha ha ha ha! Feel death. Embrace death. Life is short. Only death was eternal. Offer your life and soul. I need an army of undead. Damn it. Kill this lunatic. That's right. Don't be afraid. He's alone. Kill." All of a sudden, the underground world's residents, who were used to massacres and deaths, picked up their weapons and attacked this bastard who had killed over 100 people in an instant. In particular, a middle-aged man wearing the badge of the Adepts Association quickly formed a massive magic array beneath his feet. Immediately afterward, one bird after another made entirely of flames emerged from the magic array and flew toward the target. In an instant, the soaring flames and explosions engulfed the surrounding area within a radius of several dozen meters. Boom, boom, boom. Every time a bird completed a collision, it would produce a violent explosion and flames. It was just like high explosives. However, when the dust in the air gradually dispersed, everyone was surprised to find that the young man was completely unharmed under such a violent explosion. To be precise, it was a shield made of pale white bones that defended against the explosion and flames. At this moment, he stood on the spot with a dangerous smile on his face and lightly knocked on the black coffin. The next second, bang, the thick and heavy bone shield exploded on the spot. Countless sharp bones were like arrows released from a bow, drawing a beautiful parabola in the sky and then directly enveloping the people within a radius of 100 meters. Not good. Dodge. A woman in her 30s seemed to have noticed something and immediately shouted to warn her companions around her. Unfortunately, she shouted too late. In the blink of an eye, arrows made of sharp bones rained down from the sky, bringing pain and death. Leg. My leg. F***CK. There's a curse on these bones. No, I don't want to die. Save me. Looking at the wailing Azura field, the young man bent his waist and bowed slightly. He spoke with a slightly joyful tone. "Hello, everyone. My name is Nason. Nice to meet you all. In order to express my gratitude, I've decided to let you all die quickly. After all, as the host, it's very rude to make a guest from afar wait for so long." Host? Guest? What the F*** are you trying to say? The werewolf, whose abdomen had been pierced by two thick leg bones, struggled and questioned loudly. I hate boorish beasts. Goodbye. The young man, who called himself Nason, did not even look at the werewolf. He raised his arm and made a grabbing motion. Bang! One of the thick and solid leg bones exploded without any warning. It tore this unlucky werewolf into pieces. No mercy. No mercy. There was only a merciless slaughter. In less than 10 minutes, the young man had slaughtered the thousands of people who had teleported here with him. It was like a real-life version of mowing grass. Even the powerful adepts were unable to do anything. Once he was done, he quickly turned around and greeted the forest behind him. Lords of Brooklyn, the trash has been dealt with. You can come out now. Who are you? Accompanied by a pleasant female voice, the Witch of Desire, Catherine, slowly walked out of the forest. At this moment, her eyes were filled with caution and fear. Her pupils even shot out a frightening purple light. Nason, didn't I already introduce myself? The young man did not seem to care about the other party's hostility. The corner of his mouth curled up, revealing a playful expression. You should understand that we want more than just a name. Cain also led his men out of the forest from another direction. They formed a semicircle around the terrifying enemy. Oh, so you're referring to this. The reason I appeared in the fragment world is because of my teacher's orders. He asked me to kill all of you and then take the fragment world's core. Oh, right, which one of you is called Zhang? My teacher told me that it's best not to kill him first. Chapter 409. Catherine could no longer hold back the rage that had accumulated in her heart in the face of the young man's unbridled provocation. Purple light shot out from her eyes, instantly forming a terrifying force field. Wait! Cain tried to stop the witch, but unfortunately, it was too late. The two opposing invisible force fields, one on the left and one on the right, were like two giant palms, sandwiching the black coffin and the young man standing on top of it. The next second, boom, not only were the skeletons around the coffin smashed into bone dust, but even the air let out a loud sound, as if an explosion had occurred. But what was incredible was that the black coffin seemed to be protected by some sort of power. Not only was it not smashed into pieces, there wasn't even a single crack on it. Seeing this scene, not only was Catherine shocked, but even Cain couldn't help but frown. They knew very well how powerful the force fields formed in a few short seconds were. Not to mention a mere wooden coffin, even a skyscraper made of reinforced concrete would be destroyed in an instant. But now, the black coffin on the ground had blocked the powerful force field. Anyone who wasn't an idiot would understand that this thing was no ordinary item. Madam, are you trying to kill me? Nathan pretended to be curious and blinked his eyes. Go, finish him. Catherine didn't intend to waste any more time and immediately gave the order to attack. She clearly knew that from the moment she made her move, the option of negotiation had disappeared. Rather than wasting her breath, it was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. Even if she was wrong, she would do it to the end. Damn it, let's go. Cain cursed under his breath and decisively joined in, launching an attack on the young man. Perhaps he was willing to see his enemy, the Witch of Desire, die, but he didn't want this young man who had suddenly barged in to become the victor. Moreover, the other party had clearly stated that he wanted to kill everyone. As long as he wasn't an idiot, he would have resisted and gotten rid of the greatest threat first before settling his personal grudges. For a moment, countless weapons, spells, and wizard spells swarmed toward Na's senator, but he wasn't flustered. He opened his arms and chanted loudly, "Wake up! Wake up, undead that crawled out from the depths of the underworld. Obey my orders. I will bestow upon you new bodies to satisfy your thirst for blood and death." In the blink of an eye, the hundreds of skeletons on the ground were injected with dark gray energy, and they stood up shakily. For some reason, they didn't start attacking the living people closest to them like the lowest level skeletons. Instead, they raised a finger and pointed at the sky. When the hundreds of skeletons raised their index fingers, the body of the Grim Reaper with a huge scythe rapidly expanded and blocked all physical and magical attacks. Then it raised the scythe that was emitting a strange black mist again. Cassandra seemed to have discovered something and immediately shouted, "Oh no! Hide! Ha! Hide! Where could he hide? Nothing in this world could escape death. Even the gods are no exception." Nason pursed his lips and laughed sarcastically. At the same time, he waved his hand gently. The giant Grim Reaper floating in the air seemed to have received some kind of order. It swung the scythe in its hand towards the crowd. There was no difference from before. Anyone who was swept by the scythe fell to the ground on the spot and quickly rotted, turning into white skeletons. Other than a few lords who had mastered the mysterious time and power, no one could escape this disaster. However, even they were severely injured in the confrontation of souls. Blood began to spurt out of their mouths, noses, ears, and eyes. Kars, who was proficient in curses and souls, seemed to have noticed something. He immediately reminded the remaining survivors in a deep voice, "Attack the coffin. All of his power comes from there." "Oh, I didn't expect that someone could see through Donatus's true face." Nason raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Donatus? Is this the name you gave to the Grim Reaper?" "Unfortunately, although it is very powerful, it is far from being worthy of being called a god," Carr said as he took out a small bag of bones that had been smoked with a special spice. Catherine saw these bones and subconsciously took 2 steps back. She asked with a serious expression, "Are you sure you want to use these?" "Of course. This young man is not simple. We have to get rid of his so-called teacher before he shows up." After saying that, Kars carefully threw the bones into the air, closed his eyes, and began to chant. After about a minute or two, all the bones began to emit different colors of light. Then, these bones made strange sounds and gradually pieced together to form 5 voodoo dolls of different shapes. As they were pieced together from bones, their appearance was quite terrifying. Moreover, from time to time, they would emit eerie cries and laughter. These sounds seemed to have magic, making everyone who heard it involuntarily start laughing or crying bitterly. There were a few unlucky people who were closer to them. Soon, they kept trembling in crazy laughter and crying. In the end, their souls left their bodies and were devoured by the dolls. "Retreat. Everyone retreat quickly." Cassandra undoubtedly felt the powerful curse nurtured within the voodoo dolls. She called her allies to a safe distance away. At the same time, the resurrected skeletons near the black coffin seemed to be affected by the voodoo dolls. Their bodies trembled violently, and then they began to fall down in groups. Such a strange phenomenon made even Zhang Cheng, who was hiding in the forest, tense up involuntarily, let alone the cannon fodder that had been recruited at the last minute. After all, in all the magic confrontations, the confrontation between death and souls was often the most bizarre and fatal. No matter which side was the slightest bit careless, they would immediately fall into the abyss and be taken away by the victor. Even death would be a luxury. As a mage, he could clearly see that the voodoo dolls that Kars had summoned contained a curse that was almost tangible. It was the accumulation of resentment accumulated by thousands of living people who had died unnaturally. If it was thrown into the reservoir of city, it would cause the death of all the residents in the city within a few days. But Nason's trump card was not weak either. If he guessed correctly, the black coffin was likely to contain a relic of a god related to death. It could be a part of the body, or it could be a used utensil. In short, this thing contained the authority of death, which was why it could give an undead unimaginably terrifying power. Chapter 410. Interesting, but do you think you can kill me with the hatred and curses of these ordinary people? Watching the skeletons that came back from the dead fall one by one, Nason did not show the slightest bit of panic. Instead, he showed an expression of interest. There seemed to be no fear in his dictionary at all, allowing the voodoo doll to inject the terrifying curse into his soul. "Oomph. You're very arrogant, young man. Don't you know that even a true god would inevitably decline and die under the curse of a mortal?" The so-called curse was originally a strong obsession gathered together, a kind of unwillingness that came from the depths of one's heart. Perhaps 1 or 2 of them would be nothing, but thousands of them gathered together would produce unimaginable power. Now, please experience it for yourself. As the last word fell, Kars suddenly injected all the energy in his body into the voodoo doll. In an instant, a black mark appeared on the left side of the young man's face, and then the black color began to spread rapidly. Neck, arms, back, body. In less than a minute, nearly a third of his body was covered in an unknown black color. Moreover, this black color also caused the skin to fester, sores, and pus to flow. Then a large number of white maggots drilled out of the sores, constantly gnawing on the rotten flesh, and finally broke out of the cocoon, turning into flies that filled the sky. If an ordinary person saw this scene, they would have been unable to help but have goosebumps all over their body, vomiting on the ground. However, Nason looked at the rotten half of his body with interest, smiling as he commented, cursing the soul to make the body decay and die. Not a bad method. But you forgot one thing. In the face of true death, decay is only an extremely short process. As soon as he finished speaking, he took the initiative to open the black coffin and took out a golden scepter with a T-shaped top and a forked end. Although this scepter had neither gorgeous carvings nor dazzling gems, it emitted a suffocating death energy, as if it represented the law of death itself. Beside the scepter, there was a mummy wrapped in white bandages. Obviously, this mummy was the main body of the huge Grim Reaper, floating in the air. Just as everyone's attention was attracted by the influence in the coffin, Nason's decaying body suddenly stopped. All the rotten flesh, abscesses, maggots, and flies seemed to have turned into dust under the erosion of time and scattered with the wind. Even his body had completely disappeared, leaving behind only a white skeleton. At this moment, the expressions on everyone's faces froze. Nason's white skeleton raised his scepter high and let out a burst of eerie laughter. Ha! Did you feel it? It was the authority of the ancient Egyptian god of death, Anubis. In front of it, your lowly strength is as laughable as ants. Now I grant you a merciful death. Dainates, lead your army and kill all living beings. As you wish, the death-godlike undead creature floating in the air did not say a word, opening its hollow, twisted mouth and spitting out countless of its own kind that looked exactly like itself but were much smaller in size, all of them surging towards the liege's location. They did not care about injuries or death at all. Every time they swung their scythes, they could take away a person's soul. Slaughter. Death. In less than 10 minutes, more than half of Brooklyn's liege had been killed or injured. Only Morat, the desire which Catherine, the witch Dr. Kars, the elemental envoy Cain, the daughter of nature Cassandra, and her lover Bane were still in good condition. Damn it, think of something. We can't last long like this. Bane, who was possessed by the spirit of the Great Bear, gritted his teeth and complained after slapping a small death god away. Catherine, why don't you try to arouse his desire? Cassandra asked her old rival without turning her head. The latter rolled her eyes and replied, Idiot, he has already embraced death. What desire do you think a dead person has? Moreover, he has a Anubis scepter in his hand. Although I don't think it's real, even if it's a fake, it's not easy to deal with. Ladies, don't argue. I think it's time for us to abandon our prejudices and take out our real trump card. To show our sincerity, let's start with me. With that said, Cain took out several bottles of casting media from his pocket and sprinkled them into the sky. Accompanied by a low chant, a fireball that emitted intense light and heat like the sun quickly appeared in the sky out of thin air. It was more than 50 meters in diameter, and the surface constantly spewed out gorgeous flames, just like a solar prominence. Catherine saw this scene, and her pupils shrank violently. She muttered to herself in disbelief. Nuclear fusion? You're actually trying to simulate the creation of a small sun? That's right. You know, for this, I specially went to study for a master's degree in nuclear physics. But until today, I still can't control it very well. And whether it's the temperature or the explosive power, it's far inferior to the real sun. In addition, I suggest you put up a protective force field and close your eyes. Otherwise, it's very likely that you'll go blind. With that, Cain raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. The next second, a golden fireball fell from the sky. Boom! Instantly, the whole world was shrouded in white light. No one knew how long it took. Maybe it was a few seconds, maybe it was a few minutes. In short, when the white light completely disappeared, only a huge deep pit was left where the fireball fell. The surrounding soil and stones were all turned into gravel. There were even pieces of translucent crystals in the center. It was as if a nuclear bomb was detonated. But the range was obviously not as large as a real nuclear weapon. The shock wave completely lost its destructive power when it reached a diameter of about 250 meters. Looking at the messy center of the explosion, Kars immediately frowned and asked, "He's dead?" No, be careful. Cassandra, who had always been very sensitive to life and death, immediately warned. But just when Kars turned around and wanted to say something, a huge black shadow suddenly appeared out of thin air and directly beheaded him on the spot with a scythe. Poof! Dazzling blood suddenly spurted several meters from the neck, and then the head rolled to the ground. With just a single strike, this powerful witch doctor had become a headless corpse. Chapter 411. In just a short moment, 2 more people had been killed. Most importantly, be it Cain or Catherine, none of them had been able to find the other party's weakness. They did not even understand how this young man, who had turned into a skeleton, could survive the explosion. Did he use some kind of teleportation magic or the mysterious power of the scepter? The unknown was the source of fear, especially when the unknown was associated with death. Even the most rational person would inevitably be shaken. There was no doubt that Cain was such a person. To be precise, when he saw with his own eyes that the trump card that he had kept for many years was useless, his psychological defense was struggling on the verge of collapse. Now that he saw that even a powerful lich like Karsi was easily killed, he finally couldn't help but abandon his so-called allies and run into the depths of the forest. Obviously, he had lost the confidence to defeat the enemy, so he chose to retreat. Damn it, come back. Cassandra shouted when she saw Cain running away. She simply couldn't believe that the old man, who was usually so confident in his victory, was acting so unbearably now. Run, be reaped by the scythe of the grim reaper in fear and trembling. I look forward to the taste of your soul. Nason shouted excitedly as he followed closely behind. He was ready to get rid of this enemy who was a strong threat to him. But before he could stab the golden scepter into Cain's back, the sky was suddenly covered by a huge shadow. The next second, boom! Dragon flames mixed with arcane energy fell from the sky and shrouded the area within a radius of more than 10 meters. The fierce burning and explosion turned the entire area into a purgatory. A giant dragon with a body length of more than 40 meters had just finished a dive and landed steadily on the ground. Needless to say, it was the mystic dragon that had just been summoned from the Song of Ice and Fire world, Kulo Kelba. Compared to the last time they met, this little fellow had grown a little. Moreover, the scales all over its body had become thicker, harder, and translucent, emitting an enchanting violet glow. From afar, it looked like a pile of priceless gems. Dragon? Leopard Man Morat's face was filled with disbelief. Not only him, but the other survivors around had similar reactions. After all, on this earth, dragons were a product of the mythological era. According to records, the last one should have died around the 1st century AD. In other words, there were no longer any powerful and mysterious magical creatures like dragons on Earth. There were only some life forms that had inherited the bloodline of dragons. But now, a genuine dragon had appeared before their eyes. It was inevitable that everyone would be excited and nervous. When Cain, who had luckily dodged the attack, turned around and stared at the prehistoric behemoth that had fallen on the ground, Nason, who was holding a scepter, suddenly rushed out from the raging flame and laughed out loud. Ha ha ha! Awesome! A dragon. A real dragon. I want to kill it. Turn into a death dragon. This is a great undertaking that even Teacher couldn't accomplish. He was no longer as calm as before. Not only was his monk's robe burnt, but his bones were also covered in burn marks. However, he still maintained a mental state that was close to madness. "I'm sorry, this is my dragon. You can't do anything without my permission." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng flashed to Nason's side. He held up a rune that was constantly flashing with golden light and asked softly, "Do you know about holy light?" "Holy light?" Nason repeated subconsciously. "Yes, holy light. It's an extremely pure and extreme energy. It's said that it's the natural enemy of the undead." As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng directly threw the rune into his opponent's empty chest. Then, a dazzling golden light illuminated the sky and earth. "Ah, damn it, damn it, I'm going to kill you." Nason's miserable cry came from the center of the light. "Kill me? I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you can't do it because I've seen through your little trick." "Kulo Kelba, Dragon's Breath." Zhang Cheng sneered and gave the order to attack. Roar! The giant dragon did not hesitate. It immediately opened its bloody mouth and spat out a fatal flame at the enemy's location. When the fatal spit was over, Nason somehow returned to his original appearance. However, his whole body was severely burned. He asked while panting, "How did you find out?" Zhang Cheng smiled and explained, "It's very simple. It's not difficult to notice after observing your every move. Ever since you picked up that scepter, your signs of life have completely disappeared. This means that either your body and soul have been devoured, or you've transferred your body and soul to another space or subspace. I personally believe that it's the latter. Later on, Lord Kane's full-strength attack confirmed my guess. If I didn't guess wrongly, that skeleton just now should be the medium to use this scepter, right? By controlling the skeleton, you can prevent your body from suffering any kind of damage. Even if it's destroyed, you only need to inject a little magic power to regenerate it. On the surface, it looks like you've never been hurt. However, it's a pity that the space you're in seems to be filled with the energy of death. So when you encounter the holy light, there will immediately be violent tremors and rejection. As a result, your body is forced to leave the space you're hiding in. To put it bluntly, all your power comes from that scepter, including this undead that looks like the Grim Reaper. As long as I take away the scepter, you'll be as weak as a baby." "Take away my scepter." "No, you can't do it at all. No one in this world can do it. Dainates, kill him." Nason roared crazily. "Okay, let's end the game here. I'm tired of your performance. In addition, compared to a real powerhouse, your actions are as laughable as a child's." After saying that, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The doomed sentinel, who had been lying in ambush beside the black coffin, suddenly raised its two-handed greatsword burning with green, evil energy fire and slashed at the mummy wrapped in countless cloth strips inside. Bang! In less than a second, the mummy was burned to ashes under the merciless destruction of the evil energy fire, and it let out an ear-piercing and eerie scream. The Grim Reaper floating in the air also gradually disappeared, leaving not even a trace behind. It had to be said that before figuring out Nason's ability, Zhang Cheng had once been surprised by the overwhelming power displayed by the other party. Chapter 412. A great mage once said that there was no enemy in the world that a single fireball could not deal with. If that did not work, then 2, 3. In front of the Church of the Five Fireballs, all struggles and resistance were futile. Although Zhang Cheng himself was not a follower of the Church of the Five Fireballs, this did not stop him from using some of the principles to get rid of the enemy. There were no powerful spells, there were no fancy spellcasting techniques, nor did he use the so-called wisdom. All he did was use the holy light runes to force Nathan out of the space where he was hiding, and then let Kulo Kelba spit out a scorching breath. After a few repetitions, this once arrogant young man had completely turned into a lump of black, unknown matter. Once again, it was proven that the simpler and more direct the strategy, the more effective it was. As for his soul, it was directly extracted and made into a pure black soul fragment. Darkness, evil, death, madness. Even in the eyes of the demons of hell, a mortal who could degrade his soul to such an extent was definitely worth a lot of effort to nurture. Perhaps a few hundred years later, a great demon who controlled a whole new domain would rise and become a powerful force. But now, Zhang Cheng hoped to obtain some knowledge and secrets about this world from the other party's soul, so he carefully put the fragment into the lowest layer of the soul bag. After doing all this, he picked up the golden scepter that had withstood the dragon's breath several times without any damage. As a result, when he held it in his hand, he immediately felt an extremely pure death energy enter his body, and then a small amount of information quickly appeared in his mind. After a full 3 minutes, he slowly came back to his senses. At the same time, he figured out what special abilities this weapon called Anubis scepter had. First of all, the person who held the scepter could control death. Just like the literal meaning, it could control everything related to death, such as awakening the spirits of the dead, injecting energy into the vengeful spirits to make them more powerful. But all these had a price to pay, and, at the same time, there was a clear upper limit in terms of quality and quantity. In general, it was suitable for group battles, but not for dealing with overly powerful individuals. Secondly, it could temporarily pull the wielder into the gap between the material world and the spiritual world, so that they would be immune from all forms of attacks. But the disadvantage was that once there was interference from forces like the holy light, the gap would quickly become unstable, causing the wielder to be squeezed out. Finally, in the most powerful function, it was a key to open the tomb of the pyramid of Osiris hidden in the desert. As everyone knew, according to Egyptian myths and legends, Osiris was the eldest son of the god of the earth, Gabu, and the god of the sky, Nut. He was the first pharaoh in Egypt, but he was too good of Osiris, and as a result, his brother, Seth, the god of the desert and war. The latter had specially designed a coffin decorated with countless gold and gems, according to his elder brother's figure, and announced at a banquet that whoever could lie in it perfectly would get the coffin. Osiris, Seth, 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 Seth with Seth, Seth, with Seth, with Seth, with Seth. His wife, Isis, tried to resurrect him. Unfortunately, she was discovered by Seth. In the end, the body was dismembered, and 14 pieces were thrown to various corners of Egypt. The end, Osiris, 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 Osiris. Osiris was with Osiris. But even so, Osiris was resurrected for one night and gave birth to Horus, the eagle god, with his wife, who symbolized the power of the pharaoh. He finally completed his revenge. It had to be said that the gods of ancient Egypt were really powerful. They could still have children without a penis. Osiris did not know whether it was because gods used different parts to give birth to children or because there was a green grassland growing on Osiris' head. Of course, the above was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that after Osiris died, Anubis personally smeared holy oil on his body, made him into a mummy, and buried him under the vast desert of Egypt. As for Osiris' soul, it was reborn in the underworld of Egypt. Even with Anubis' concession, he gradually became the supreme master of the underworld. Zhang Cheng could not imagine how much benefit could be gained from exploring the tomb of a god. He could not understand why Faust would give such an important thing to an arrogant and ignorant apprentice. Just as he was puzzled, there was a sudden violent energy fluctuation in the air again. In the blink of an eye, a portal opened out of thin air, and a Caucasian man in his 40s with a gloomy face walked out. He had long white hair, and his eyes looked lifeless. Coupled with a pure black robe, he was as horrifying as a ghost that had crawled out of the grave. However, he did not seem to have such awareness. He first scanned the surroundings, and his gaze quickly stopped on Kolo Kelba. A dragon? A real dragon? Who are you? Catherine seemed to have noticed something, and her eyes showed a strong sense of vigilance. Hee, are you sure you want to know my name? The man turned around and asked with a faint smile. Before the desire which could reply, Zhang Cheng immediately stepped forward and bowed deeply with one hand on his chest. Welcome, esteemed Councilman John. Or would you prefer to hear another name? Master Necromancer Faust? Oh, you know me. Unbelievable. Who told you? Laffern? Or my cute apprentice, Nathan? The man touched his chin in surprise. It could be seen that he was in a very relaxed state, without a trace of vigilance. Normally, this would be the best time to launch a surprise attack. However, for some reason, Zhang Cheng felt that something was amiss. He frowned subconsciously and continued probing. No, that's not it. I'm curious. Aren't you afraid of being held responsible by the European Supreme Council? Even with your strength, I'm afraid you can't stop so many senators working together, right? Hunt. Ha ha. Faust seemed to have heard something funny and laughed happily. As he laughed, he teased, "Do you think those angels didn't hunt me down when I destroyed the Vatican's Paradise on Earth plan? But why am I still alive and well? Young man, this world is bigger and more exciting than you think. What you see now is only a small part of it. When the day comes when you have such qualifications, Laffern will naturally tell you the truth, because you are an indispensable and important part of his plan. Please remember, in our world, nothing is more important than power. Only when you have enough power can you escape the fate of being manipulated." Chapter 413. I don't understand. Zhang Cheng frowned and pretended to be puzzled. He obviously wanted to get more information from Laffin. However, before he could finish, Faust waved his hand impatiently. "Okay, I know you must have a lot of questions in your heart that you want answers to, but my time is limited, and there are some things that you don't have the right to know yet, right?" Recalling what Laffin said before, Zhang Cheng seemed to have suddenly understood something. He stood on the spot and fell in a deep thought. Faust glanced at him from the corner of his eye, and a smile appeared on his gloomy face. He then said to the other surviving lords, "I believe all of you must be very clear that the essence of the war games is to select qualified managers. However, there's one thing that you don't know, and that is to select special talents with potential." Special talents? Catherine's expression changed slightly. That's right. Talent, character, ability, strength, and future development potential are all criteria for reference. However, generally speaking, the Council will not take the initiative to participate and will only secretly send someone to observe silently. However, it's different this time. Perhaps you haven't realized what the millennium means, but many old guys like me who have lived long enough understand that from the first day of the millennium, a new cycle will begin again. When he said these words, Faust's emotionless eyes revealed intense excitement and anticipation. Unfortunately, it didn't last long before he returned to his almost indifferent state. Perhaps you can't understand the importance of cycles, but I can tell you clearly that from now on, the war games will no longer be your business. There will be members of the Supreme Council participating in the whole process every time. So, to a certain extent, I am the examiner responsible for determining your results in life and death. What about the criteria? What are the passing criteria? Kane asked with squinted eyes. As an old man who had survived a disaster, he had completely given up on fighting for the position of a counselor. He just wanted to leave this dangerous world alive. It's very simple. You'll pass if you defeat the apprentice I sent. Otherwise, you'll fail. So far, only Zhang has truly passed, so all of you have to take a make-up test, Faust said as he slowly raised his left hand. In the blink of an eye, a cloud of black smoke spread out in all directions from his palm. All the corpses that came into contact with it immediately floated up and flew into the air. When thousands of skeletons were gathered together, they finally formed a gigantic skeleton puppet made entirely of bones of various sizes. Different from the ordinary enlarged version of the skeleton, it was more like a killing machine that had been horribly magically modified. Not only were its limbs modified into the shape of a mantis sickle, but the ribs on its abdomen were all designed as spider claws, and the ends were also extremely sharp bone knives. In addition, the bones had been reinforced by an unknown spell. Most likely, ordinary swords or firearms would only leave a white mark on them. When the last wisp of black smoke was injected into the skeleton's body, 2 red lights suddenly burst out from its esoteric eye sockets. It waved its sickle-like limbs and charged in the direction of the surviving lords. Seeing that his creation had charged more than 20 meters away, Faust calmly reminded them, "Now, the test begins." Damn it! Dodge! Cassandra quickly took out a handful of seeds from her pocket and scattered them on the ground. After these seeds landed on the ground, a large number of vines immediately broke out of the ground and grew at an incredible speed, trying to entangle the huge skeleton in place. Even if they could not, they could at least slow it down a little. Attack its joints. With superhuman speed and strength, the whirleopard Morat leaped, raised a hammer-like weapon, and smashed it down. Bang! After a muffled sound, the huge skeleton obviously tilted. Naturally, Catherine would not let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She immediately activated her mind and prepared to cut off one of the enemy's legs first. Just as the few of them were trying their best to survive, Zhang Cheng, who was standing not far away, suddenly raised his head and asked with a serious face, "Pardon me for asking, but are you really going to seize the core of this fragment of time?" "Oh, why do you ask this? If my answer is yes, do you still want to stop me?" Faust turned his head with great interest. "Please answer my question directly." Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a dangerous light. "Hee, you're very interesting. Well, since you want to know, I'll tell you. Yes, I'm determined to get this fragment of time. Tell me, how are you going to stop me?" Faust stared at the young man's eyes with great interest. As an old man who had lived for centuries, he could clearly feel the growing hostility in the air. At the same time, he was also very curious about what trump card the young man had that he dared to make such an obvious provocative move under the premise of knowing his true identity. Zhang Cheng took a deep breath, took off his contact lenses, and responded with a slightly self-deprecating tone. "Power. I plan to use overwhelming power to stop you, or even kill you. Maybe in your eyes, I'm just a weak ant, but in fact, the power I have is not necessarily inferior to yours. It's just that this power is not easy to control, so I've never used it before. You're the first person to see its true form." As the last word fell, Zhang Cheng's body suddenly released a terrifying amount of dark energy and shadow energy into the surroundings. Due to the intense nature of the energy, even the space around him was slightly distorted. At the same time, his body began to rapidly grow taller and stronger. His skin was covered with strange red scales, and his legs grew hooves like that of a mountain goat. A thick and strong tail kept whipping the ground. After the transformation was complete, he had completely transformed from a human into an Irida demon. Especially the energy that unintentionally burst out of his eyes. It was simply suffocating. Phew! Is this the power that can be obtained by completely releasing the seal? Is this the forbidden knowledge and magic that the Dark Titan imparted to the Irida people? Awesome! This is awesome! Ha ha ha! Zhang Cheng raised his hands high and unscrupulously released the almost endless energy in his body. For a moment, the ground under his feet was distorted by the dark energy, and with a boom, it shattered, and green, evil fire spewed out from the depths of the Earth's core. There was no doubt that this fragment of world was completely contaminated by the dark energy. It would not be long before all life in this world would be completely devoured and turned into an endless stream of dark energy that would return to the body of the Irida demon. Chapter 414. Evil, twisted, chaotic. My God, what have you turned yourself into? Faust's pupils constricted as he stared at the terrifying power emanating from the body of the Irida demon. He could no longer maintain his composure, and his jaw dropped in shock. Although he was a powerful necromancer who had deciphered the mystery of death and obtained immortality to a certain extent, he still felt an unprecedented pressure when faced with the advanced magic civilization of Irida that had been developed for thousands of years and the taboo knowledge imparted by the Dark Titan Sargeras. Tremble before the army. Mortal, death will be your only destination. Zhang Cheng was obviously affected by the demon's soul. His mind was in a state of near madness, and he had no idea what he was talking about. There was no hesitation. After a short conversation, he directly controlled the energy and began to cast a powerful spell. In less than 10 seconds, a huge, evil fireball fell from the sky and began the battle. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a loud bang. Dazzling green flames scattered in all directions. Unlike ordinary flames, the evil fire could not be extinguished at all. Faust could not dodge in time and was only touched by a little bit of it. Soon, it began to spread rapidly, and he had no choice but to tear off a large piece of his clothes. However, after regaining his senses, he did not sit still and wait for death. He quickly took out a handful of golden powder and scattered it on the huge skeleton. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton was plated with a layer of glittering gold. It was no longer afraid of being burned by the evil fire. It abandoned its original target and rushed towards Zhang Cheng. Fool! Zhang Cheng curled his lips in disdain and shot out a bubble of arcane energy from the tip of his finger. The moment the bubble came into contact with the skeleton, another loud bang reverberated in the air. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, the violent arcane explosion instantly pulverized everything within 10 meters of him. The huge skeleton was pushed into the air by the force of the explosion. Before it could even begin to fall, a dark shadow suddenly appeared on its forehead without any warning. Then, the huge skeleton seemed to be eroded by some kind of terrible energy and began to disintegrate in the air. When it landed, it fell apart on the spot with a crash. In a matter of seconds, Zhang Cheng, who had obtained all of the demon's power, easily destroyed the giant skeleton that left the lords helpless. This was especially true for the last one, the Army Grasp, which could only be mastered by high-level Erita spellcasters. Its power was far beyond his imagination. As a person who longed for great power from the bottom of his heart, he had never felt so good before. It was as if every move he made had the power to destroy the world. Power! What an overwhelming power! It was filled with the power of destruction and kingship. Even though Marasa's memories and obsessions were constantly attacking his soul, he was still unwilling to give up on this terrifying power. Seeing that his creation was easily destroyed, Faust finally became serious. He narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself, "Well, it seems that I have to bring out my trump card." As the last word left his mouth, he pulled off the miniature coffin made of gray wood that hung around his neck and threw it forward. The small coffin grew bigger and bigger in the air, and finally became a huge coffin about 8 meters long and 2.5 meters wide. Asterisk bang. Asterisk, as soon as it landed, a huge force sent the coffin lid flying. A huge mummy wrapped in pale yellow bandages crawled out from within. It held a dagger that glowed with red light in one hand, and a thick chain with a sharp hook at the end of the chain in the other. Shadow sting. Zhang Cheng had no intention of giving the enemy a breather. He immediately raised his hands and began to guide the magical energy. In an instant, a black cylinder made entirely of shadow energy pierced out from under the mummy's feet and quickly exploded. Normally speaking, this level of damage would cause serious injuries or even death to a real giant, let alone a mummy whose body structure was already very weak. But strangely, the huge mummy did not seem to be hurt at all. It stood on the spot and trembled for a moment before swinging the chain, trying to hook its opponent with the hook. Zhang Cheng, who sensed that something was wrong, frowned subconsciously. He shot out several shadow arrows in succession, trying to figure out what was going on. Faust saw this and pursed his lips, teasing, "Why, are you surprised? I admit that the power you're displaying is far beyond my expectations. But remember what I said just now. This world is much bigger and more mysterious than you think. What you've seen is only a small part of it. Take this mummy, for example. Do you think it's just an undead life that was created? No, it's a real demigod body from the mythological era." Demigod. His chaotic thoughts severely affected Zhang Cheng's ability to think. After a moment of hesitation, he immediately began to cast powerful spells. Corrosion, Curse, Shadow Arrow Rain, Finger of Death, Life Siphon, Soul Burn. One after another, powerful spells were cast with an almost unlimited supply of energy. With him as the center, hundreds of meters around him were shrouded in terrifying magic. Even Cain and the others who were not far away were baptized by the aftershocks. They dodged in all directions in panic. Any careless mistake, and they would die without a burial place. They could not believe that the young man who was once considered to have considerable potential actually had such terrifying power. However, what was even more unbelievable was that the gigantic mummy was still unscathed after being hit by wave after wave of spells. The yellow bandage wrapped around its body seemed to have some kind of magical power that could reflect all the spells. Boom! Another demonic fireball fell from the sky and smashed the mummy 2 steps back. Faust seemed to have noticed Zhang Cheng's abnormal state of mind. He hid behind the mummy and reminded him with a smile, "Give up. You can't destroy it. In fact, back in the Vatican, thousands of angels could not hurt it at all. You may be powerful and have spell-casting abilities that I can never reach, but on the path of death, I'm farther than you. Before you comprehend the true meaning of death, my creations are invincible to you." Chapter 4:15. Are you crazy? When Faust felt the terrifying energy emitted by the red meteorite, all the hairs on his body stood on end. He might not remember the last time he had such a reaction, but he would never forget the trembling that came from the depths of his soul. That was the instinctive fear of death. It was a warning signal from the depths of his brain. Even though Faust was not very good at elemental magic, he could still clearly recognize that once the red crystal engraved with mysterious symbols exploded, not just him, but the entire fragment world might collapse. This was no longer a fight in the ordinary sense. It was a suicide mission to tie explosives to oneself and perish together with the enemy. Crazy? No, I'm very clear-headed. Choose now, either give up on the core of the fragment world or have a taste of my final trump card. There is no third choice. I really want to see if you and your bandaged corpse can survive a terrifying energy explosion. Zhang Cheng's eyes were still filled with an incomparably crazy light. Due to the constant erosion of the dark energy and shadows, his mental state was very unstable at the moment, and there was even an indescribable desire to be destroyed. No wonder in the history of Azeroth, those who accepted the dark energy either went completely crazy or became schemers and ambitious. This kind of twisted power that constantly affected one's mind was simply not something a normal person could resist. What was even more frightening was that the soul of Irita's demon, Marasa, had not yet awakened from slumber. If it regained its consciousness, then Zhang Cheng would have to face a double attack. If you detonate that thing, you and your men will die too. I don't believe you would make such a stupid decision. Faust reminded him with a serious expression. Zhang Cheng sneered and curled his lips. If that's the case, let's try it. Just as he finished speaking, a green light suddenly appeared in the center of the meteorite, and in just a few seconds, it began to spread in all directions, forming a dense network of veins like a spider web. As more and more veins appeared, the range was getting bigger and bigger. An astonishing power began to spread in all directions. It was like an extremely unstable, high-pressure energy cluster, and it began to tremble involuntarily. Damn it! Stop! Stop! You lunatic! Faust finally panicked when he saw the crystal constantly emitting a strong energy resonance. He could not help but panic, not to mention whether the energy explosion could kill everyone on the spot. Just the collapse of the fragment world caused by the destruction of the fragment world would crush everyone into ashes. Ha ha! Sorry it's too late. Zhang Cheng cracked a maniacal smile, raised his hand, and gently snapped his fingers. In an instant, the teleportation rune in Polik's hand began to glow, and he disappeared in just a second. At the same time, the rune on the other side of the fragment world also began to flash of the runes. She immediately grabbed the hands of the others and disappeared without a trace. Following closely behind Shamir, Clover, who was in his giant wolf form, quickly left the fragment world under the effect of the teleportation rune. After confirming that all the teleportation runes had been triggered, Zhang Cheng gently threw the meteorite that was emitting a dazzling green light forward, turned around, and jumped onto the dragon's back. Kulo Kelba undoubtedly understood his master's intention. Without another word, he soared into the air, using his powerful wings to climb higher. Just as he was 50 meters away from the ground, the meteorite finally landed at Faust's feet. The next second, boom! Under the corrosion and guidance of the evil energy, this meteorite that contained a terrifying amount of energy finally exploded violently. Its power instantly tore the ground apart. Several deep cracks appeared in the ground, reaching deep into the Earth's core. When the crimson, ordinary lava mixed with the distorted and polluted evil energy fire, a second round of destruction was set off. The entire ground was like a biscuit that had been crushed, and it began to churn, shatter, and collapse. As for the desire which Catherine and the others, they had long been swallowed by the endless energy storm in the first round of explosion. No one knew whether they were dead or alive. Although Faust had barely defended against the first round of explosion with his powerful death spell, it did not take long for him to fall into the collapsed cracks. Looking down from above, Zhang Cheng looked at the fragment world that was about to be destroyed. His ferocious face was expressionless. As a powerful demon of Arita, who controlled evil energy, shadow, and arcane magic, he could clearly feel that as the fragment world headed toward destruction, all the life and resources of this world were continuously converted into energy, transforming every cell in his body. Powerful. Strength. Perfect. No wonder the Dark Titan Sargeras immediately saw the people of Arita as the best choice to help him manage the Burning Legion when he first discovered planet Argus. Kill, Jaden, and Archaron even became the rulers of the Legion, second only to one and above tens of thousands. Suddenly, a colorful stone flew out from the bottomless cracks in the ground. Core. Zhang Cheng's calm eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Although it was the first time he had seen such a magical substance, he immediately recognized it. There was no hesitation. He immediately gathered arcane energy and formed the shape of a hand, grabbing the stone firmly and dragging it in front of him. The moment his hand came into contact with the stone, the parchment flew out of his pocket for some reason and directly sucked the core into it. When he came back to his senses, the stone had completely disappeared. On the parchment, there were small words. Trial. Seize the fragment world. Completed. Reward. Open the door to the first level of the Tower of Time. It actually devoured the core of a fragment world. Zhang Cheng stared at the parchment that was emitting a faint light in his hand and frowned subconsciously. But soon, the collapse of the world forced him to come back to his senses. He quickly used the teleportation power provided by the parchment and directly teleported himself and the dragon under his feet away. Oh, right, there was also that unknown black furball creature lying on his shoulder. Just as he left, the space formed by the fragment world began to distort and deform, becoming smaller and smaller until it was finally compressed into a singularity that could not be seen with the naked eye. Then it exploded with light 10,000 times brighter than the sun. But this light came and went quickly. In the blink of an eye, the universe once again fell into boundless darkness. Obviously, without the support of the core, this fragment world had completely disappeared forever, just as it had suddenly appeared. Chapter 416. Asterisk Rumble. Asterisk when Zhang Cheng passed through the teleportation gate, he was surprised to find that the tower that stood in the endless void was expanding outwards. It extended out to a radius of more than 10 kilometers, and the land was not dry soil or stone. Every time it extended a meter, various flowers and trees would quickly grow out of the soil. There was even a clear stream flowing slowly along the preset river course. It could be said that except for the lack of various animals, it could be called a miniature world. Smelling the fragrance of plants in the air, his chaotic mind seemed to clear up. He touched the unique tentacles of Arita on his chin and muttered to himself, "Interesting. So this is the reason for devouring the fragment world's core?" But before he could further observe the changes in his surroundings, a dazzling white light suddenly shot out from the top of the tower. Zhang Cheng, who had no time to dodge, was immediately hit. He knelt on the ground and screamed in pain. After a while, his strong demonic body began to shrink, and the dark energy and shadow slowly retracted back into his left eye. About 5 minutes later, he finally returned to his human form, panting heavily. There was no doubt that compared to the powerful Irida demons, the human body was undoubtedly very weak, and this made him very uncomfortable. But soon, he was attracted by the brand new portal in front of the tower. It was a world of white, a world of ice and snow, a world full of wildness and savagery. Just as Zhang Cheng was trying to distinguish whether this was the Horizon Province in the classic game The Elder Scrolls, or some other fantasy game, or a hardcore work of fiction, the originally closed door of the tower suddenly creaked open. In an instant, a clumsy puppet made entirely of metal walked out from the door. It first bowed politely, then greeted in a low, muffled voice, "Welcome, new master. I am Rosen, responsible for helping you manage the first floor of the Tower of Time." "Rosen? Can you tell me what you are?" Zhang Cheng struggled to get up from the ground and asked in a weak voice. Obviously, he wanted to see whether the big guy in front of him was just a magical creation with elementary intelligence or a high-level magical creation with a soul. After all, although the two sounded similar, there was a world of difference in essence. The former was like the artificial intelligence that scientists were researching. Although it looked very powerful, whether it was learning ability or logical calculation, it relied on imitating humans to complete it and did not have a true sense of self-consciousness. But the latter was a brand new life with independent consciousness, thinking, and infinite evolution from nothing, using extremely powerful spells, just like the gods in countless myths and legends created humans. Me, as you can see, I am a metal construct and also a powerful golem. My body uses the most advanced technology of the ancient Embark Empire and can almost resist the attack of high-level enchanted weapons and all spells below the ninth circle. When necessary, I can steal spells from my opponent. The metal puppet who called himself Rosen began to introduce himself, but for some reason, he never mentioned who his creator was. After all, according to Dalaran's magical theory, the construct would usually regard whoever created and awakened it as its master and would always carry out this person's orders as the highest priority. At the thought of this, Zhang Cheng immediately interrupted the boastful talk of the construct and asked curiously, "Rosen, do you still remember your creator?" "Creator?" The huge metal puppet fell silent when it heard this question, as if searching in the deepest part of its memory. After a full minute, it shook its head regretfully. "Sorry, I don't remember. I only remember that the last order I received was to obey every master who could open this door." "Then how many masters have you served?" Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and asked again. "Sorry, I don't remember." The golem shook its head again. It was obvious that an incomparably powerful force had forcibly distorted and modified a part of this golem's memory. This also meant that it was impossible for Zhang Cheng to get any answers or clues from it. However, he had already expected this, so he did not show much disappointment. He walked through the spacious entrance and looked at the furnishings on the first floor of the tower while saying without turning his head, "Rosen, tell me, what's so interesting about the first floor? Please look, this is the alchemy test bench with the most comprehensive equipment. At the same time, it also has a collection of tens of thousands of magical potion formulas, as well as hundreds of modulation techniques. This is the enchantment table. With its help, you can easily make magical items more powerful. This is the forging furnace. You can smelt any magical metal and shape it into the shape you need. As for this is the energy conversion pool. It can convert any form of energy into the attributes you need." Following Rosen's enthusiastic introduction, Zhang Cheng quickly understood the situation on the first floor of the tower. There was no doubt that this was a place to conduct all kinds of magical experiments and forge weapons and equipment. It was also a relatively safe refuge. At least compared to the magical version of Earth that was full of dangers, there was no need to worry about attacks and interference from the outside world. Apart from that, the energy conversion pool also made his eyes light up. Although he was not very clear about the specific working principle, this thing had indirectly confirmed his general energy plan. Since there was a magical device that could convert energy of different attributes to each other, it meant that he could do it too, but he had not found the trick yet. When Zhang Cheng was completely immersed in the surprise brought by the first floor of the tower, far away in the corridor of a high-end hotel in Tirana, the capital of a small European country, Albania, Lafern was engrossed in a game of chess. The person sitting opposite was none other than Faust, who had disappeared in the fragment world not long ago. However, at this moment, He did not look like he had just experienced a failure at all. He picked up the queen and gently moved it forward by 2 squares, and said with a smile, "General, you lost again. Damn it." Lafren pushed down the chess piece that he had eaten beside him in annoyance. But before he could move the king to admit defeat, a pale-skinned young man suddenly rushed in and whispered a few words in Faust's ear. The latter's face instantly became strange, and about 2 or 3 minutes later, he sighed with a bitter smile. "My old friend, I'm afraid you won't believe it, but there's a small change in the war game. Just 15 minutes ago, the entrance suddenly closed without warning." "Closed? Didn't you go there personally? Could there be an accident?" Lafren's eyes suddenly became sharp. Chapter 417. Wind. A bone-chilling wind from a world of ice and snow. At this moment, Zhang Cheng was standing in front of the massive teleportation gate, staring at the endless expanse of snow on the other side with a solemn expression. This was because a few minutes ago, the parchment had given him a new mission. Learn to maintain your rationality in the face of endless madness and anger after entering a new world. What was even more terrifying was that the gift from Nefarian, the Black Dragon King of Azeroth, had unknowingly flown out of his magic pouch and was now floating in midair. Within the black, translucent crystal, there was a silver liquid that contained a huge amount of pure energy. Needless to say, once he stepped through the teleportation portal, the Black Dragon King's resentment, which was filled with pain and regret, would surge into his body. There might even be whispers from the ancient god Enzos. Not to mention maintaining his rationality, it would be a miracle if he did not become the second Deathwing. Furthermore, until now, he had not figured out what was on the other side of the portal. Other than the endless white snow and ice, he did not see any signs of life at all. "I hate this feeling of being in the unknown." Zhang Cheng grumbled softly, forcing himself to calm down. He then stepped through the portal, intending to explore this new world first. But what he did not expect was that the moment he got close to the portal, a membrane that looked like flowing water suddenly rose from the ground. When he accidentally broke through, he was shocked to find that he was completely in the state of a soul. His body stayed in the translucent water flow, as if he was in a vegetative state and had fallen into a deep sleep. Unbelievable! Zhang Cheng would never have dreamed that his soul would be so easily separated from his body. As for the items he carried with him, they were floating in midair like the tear of Nefarian. It looked like they were prepared to follow his soul into the new world. There was no doubt that the owner of the parchment was dissatisfied with his rationality and thoughts being severely affected when he transformed into the demon of Arita. Thus, they intended to make him fall into a state of complete madness, and then slowly regain his sense of self. It had to be said that this plan was crazy, but it was undoubtedly effective. After all, there is a saying that the more difficult an enemy was to deal with, the better it was to understand them, or even become them. By the same logic, what could be more effective than falling into complete madness if one wanted to maintain one's sanity in the midst of terrifying madness? What's more, Zhang Cheng was entering as a soul this time, so he didn't have to worry about dying. He believed that as long as his soul was intact, with the power displayed by the owner of the parchment, it wouldn't be a problem for him to occupy a body. After thinking this through, he resolutely passed through the huge portal and took the initiative to enter the world of ice and snow. In the next second, Zhang Cheng's soul and all his belongings, including the tear of Nesario, appeared in the air above a huge ice cave. Before he could react to what had happened, he heard an angry roar from below. A dragon with white scales all over its body opened its mouth full of sharp fangs and spat out a mouthful of frost air that was enough to kill. It was engaged in an intense battle with a golden-haired man who held a war hammer in his hand, as well as an elf who looked rather thin and weak but had strange black skin. It had to be said that the man wielding the war hammer was very strong. He actually used his flesh and blood to withstand the white dragon's breath. Then, using the dark-skinned elf's dark spells and arrows as cover, he quickly rushed forward and swung his heavy war hammer, smashing it into the enemy's chest. Asterisk bang. The scales on the white dragon's body began to fall off, revealing a large patch of bright red muscle tissue. Perhaps seeing the dawn of victory, the golden-haired warrior began to let out a wild roar, intending to swing his hammer and deal a fatal blow. Unfortunately, the dragon was not to be trifled with. It swung its thick tail more than 6 meters away, crashing into a pile of gold coins wrapped in solid ice. Normally, if a normal person took this blow, even if their organs didn't rupture, they would at least break their bones and tendons. But this warrior actually clenched his teeth and used all his strength to throw his warhammer at the top of the ice. Asterisk bang. Asterisk kacha. Kacha. Asterisk, perhaps the people below were affected by the strong reflection of the ice and snow, unable to see what was happening. However, Zhang Cheng, who was in his soul state, could see everything clearly. The whistling warhammer did not miss. It just happened to hit a huge icicle. Then, this cone-shaped icicle broke, falling rapidly from high place. The sharpest part directly pierced through the white dragon's body below. And because it wanted to flap its wings and take off, it accidentally broke its neck when it fell, further hastening its death. There were no accidents. Killed in one blow. Seeing this unbelievable scene, Zhang Cheng suddenly felt a sense of familiarity, or perhaps déjà vu. Especially that agile, dark-skinned elf who was as vigorous as a cheetah. It began to overlap with a famous dual-wielding ranger in his memory. But unfortunately, the owner of the parchment clearly didn't like to wait. So, the moment the white dragon breathed its last, the black translucent shell that wrapped Nisario's tear suddenly shattered. In an instant, an indescribable amount of energy filled the entire cave. Zhang Cheng only felt that he was firmly grasped by a huge force and then violently stuffed into a body. In just a few seconds, a large amount of crazy thoughts, chaotic thoughts, and a pain that touched the soul all surged into his brain. Apart from that, there was also a low, but incomparably clear voice that whispered, "Destroy. Let this world tremble before your power. I am Enzos, the great nightmare god." Just as Zhang Cheng was trying to push out these chaotic thoughts and regain control of his body, the ice outside had already undergone a tremendous change. The white dragon that was originally dead had now stood up again. Its originally white scales were slowly turning black, and its 2 deep blue eyes were replaced by crimson flames. Moreover, the huge wound was rapidly healing under an unbelievable power. In the blink of an eye, the white dragon had turned into a black dragon, and its body had expanded by more than 3 times. Tempest above, who can tell me what happened? The golden-haired warrior asked, dumbfounded. Unknowingly, the powerful warhammer that he had thrown out had returned to his hands. Damn it, don't ask me. I don't know either, but I think it's best if we retreat now, or else. Chapter 4:18. Get out of the way, the black-skinned elf yelled as he drew his bow, trying to distract the dragon like before. But it was a pity that this dragon was no longer the same one. It was in a frenzied state, not fearing injury or death at all. It didn't even care about the sharp arrows as it opened its mouth and spat out a deadly dragon's breath. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the terrifying heat wave not only melted the whistling arrows, it even melted the ice within a radius of tens of meters. Even the gold coins piled up like a mountain turned into liquid and gathered together, forming a magnificent golden river. My heavens, this world has gone mad. First a white dragon turned into a black dragon, and now this black dragon is actually spitting fire? Shouldn't black dragons spit acid? If I'd known, I wouldn't have followed you to this damned place. The black-skinned elf complained as he dodged the flying sparks. It could be seen that he had experienced hundreds of battles. Even after such an inconceivable situation, he still maintained his calm, as if nothing could make that indifferent face reveal a surprised expression. He couldn't remember. The blonde warrior was much more reckless. After using the terrain as cover to avoid the scorching breath, he immediately brandished his warhammer and rushed forward, shouting, "This must be a test from the war god. I'll kill it, no matter what it becomes." Asterisk roar. Asterisk the dragon seemed to feel the provocation of this ant in front of it, and it swung its tail fiercely at his abdomen. Asterisk pa. Asterisk a crisp sound accompanied it. This arrogant and unlucky guy flew back 10 meters and crashed into a solid ice wall. With a wah sound, he spat out bright red blood. Unlike last time, he was 100% sure to have suffered serious internal injuries, and his face quickly turned pale. Wolfgar, don't try to be brave. You should know that we're no match for this dragon. It's too strong. We have to retreat. No, Drizzt, I can't accept this. I have to bring back enough merits and wealth. The blonde warrior called Wolfgar struggled to get up, throwing out his magical warhammer with all his might, planning to repeat the scene of him turning defeat into victory. However, before the warhammer could fly high into the sky, it was caught by the black dragon claw and thrown back. If he hadn't dodged quickly, he would have been smashed into a meat patty by his own weapon. Powerful. It was so powerful that it made one despair. The young man couldn't believe that his ambitious plan would have such a huge change. He couldn't understand why the white dragon that he had killed would come back to life and become a black dragon that could breathe fire. Everything happened so suddenly that even a brute like him who liked to use his fists and muscles to solve problems was at a loss. However, just because the young warrior was lost didn't mean that the elf named Drizzt would be lost as well. Not only was he not confused at all, but he also quickly released his race's talent. Dark knots, blocking the eyes of the irrational giant dragon. He then pulled his companion and ran in the opposite direction. Due to the fiery dragon's breath, just now, the place that was originally isolated by the solid ice had now become accessible. Hence, he didn't have any hesitation as he dragged Wolfgar and disappeared into the maze-like depths of the glacier. After the dark barrier disappeared, the black giant dragon found that there were no enemies around and quickly laid down quietly. Apart from his eyes that kept switching between destruction and rationality, everything else was so quiet. Nobody knew how long had passed, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few hours, or maybe a few days. In short, when the giant dragon woke up from its slumber once again, the aura of madness and destruction all over its body had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an extremely gloomy and cold temperament. After a full half a minute, a strange smile appeared on his hideous face. He then muttered to himself, Icewind Valley, the Forgotten Kingdom, Faerun Continent, Mithril 5 Heroes, and the famous divine artifact, Broken Magic Crystal, Clinchinian. I've really come to an incredible place. Obviously, after continuous efforts, Zhongcheng finally managed to temporarily suppress the overflowing negative emotions in the tear of Nesario, as well as the whispers left behind by the ancient god Enzos. However, this didn't mean that he had defeated the endless crazy thoughts. On the contrary, he was constantly being eroded, and whether it was his way of thinking or his subconscious, he was constantly sliding into the abyss of extreme evil. If someone were to cast an alignment detecting spell at this moment, they would immediately see his red to black and black to purple. Even the devils from the 9 hells and the demons from the bottomless abyss would concede defeat if they saw him. After clearing the remaining memories that originally belonged to the white dragon in his mind, Zhongcheng quickly figured out the identity of the unlucky fellow that he had taken over. The white dragon, Ingrocastimazillion. It also had another name, Icing Death. That's right. This was the fellow that should have been killed by the barbarian hero Wolfgar and the dark elf ranger Drizzt and provided with wealth and magical weapons. It was because he had killed Icing Death that Wolfgar was qualified to challenge the chief of the elk tribe and unite the barbarians under his banner to fight against the army of monsters raised by the magical crystal shards. Similarly, it was because he had obtained a magical scimitar called Icing Death from Icing Death that Drizzt could defeat the powerful demon from the bottomless abyss, Axel Thursday. But now, because of Zhongcheng's sudden intrusion, everything was disrupted. He was now eager to know the extent of the war started by the magical crystal shards. If he didn't interfere, would the 10 towns be destroyed? If he changed the course of history of the Faerun continent, would the high and mighty gods be aware of it? If they were aware of it, would they interfere? A series of questions quickly emerged in his mind. With the idea of figuring out the situation first, Zhang Cheng quickly used the natural transformation ability of dragons to transform himself into a human. He roughly scanned the valuable things in the icing death layer, such as various magical items, gems, and a small amount of gold coins, and quickly left the cave at the edge of the glacier. As for the remaining treasures that were piled up like mountains, he didn't care at all whether they would be stolen by humans or other white dragons. After all, he wasn't a dragon, and his desire for knowledge and power was far greater than wealth. In any case, as a place where magic was relatively developed, the Faron continent was one of the few worlds that had a theoretical system comparable to Azeroth. Whether it was the ancient Netheril civilization's floating city and god-killing magic, or the Amaska Empire's breakthrough space, portal technology, and magical creation technology, they were all coveted. Chapter 419. In the year 1356 of the Valley Calendar, two major events happened in the ancient Faron continent. One was that Lassan of the Scarred Valley tried to unify the valley, but failed. The kingdom of Cormel took control of Tifanton, an important border town that passed through the Stormhorn Mountains. The other event was that someone witnessed a giant dragon flying into the valley and the Sea of the Moon. No one cared about what happened in the 10 Towns, which was located at the border between the northern civilization and the wilderness. In most people's eyes, the 10 Towns was a collection of losers. Only those who were completely abandoned by the world would choose to seek a living there. They didn't know that Akar Kai Saw, a puppet controlled by the magic crystal shard, which had independent thoughts, was leading an evil army made up of goblins, half-giants, giants, trolls, orcs, and humans. They were heading towards the mighty golden hair of the 10 Towns. He swore that he would crush all forces that dared to resist his rule and be crowned as the tyrant of Icewind Valley, taking the first step towards conquering the world. Of course, the most important thing was that this army had a sinister, vicious, and cunning commander, a Baylor at the top of the food chain in the Abyss, Axel Thursday. Bryn Sander, the most powerful of the 10 Towns in the north, was now busy receiving and reorganizing the residents who had fled from other towns. Standing at the top of the hill in the middle of the frozen plains between the three lakes, anyone could clearly see that the towns of Kikoni and Kataneva in the distance were engulfed in a sea of fire. Countless goblins from the frozen wastelands had already charged into the walls and were slaughtering the elderly, women, and children without restraint. Meanwhile, the ogres and giants were blocking the docks, killing any fishermen who tried to rush over from the lake to rescue them. Vicious, brutal, merciless. The broken crystal, Clincinian had used practical actions to prove that he was indeed one of the most terrifying divine artifacts in the entire Faron continent. Under his bewitchment, even the cowardly goblins became brave and fearless, and the traitorous orcs became loyal. In less than 2.5 hours, all the towns around Lake Durden had fallen. Any form of resistance was futile and laughable in the face of the endless monster army. Looking at the ordinary people who were killed and even eaten, Zhang Cheng did not have a trace of sympathy or pity on his face. Instead, he curled up the corner of his mouth and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Well, it's time to choose a side again. Should I choose good or evil this time?" There was no doubt that with the dragon's excellent flying ability, it did not take long for him to cross the endless frozen plains and enter the 10 Towns in human form before the monster army. At the moment, no one knew that a terrifying force that could turn the tide was hiding in Bryn Sander. Although Zhang Cheng had lost most of his power, including dark energy and shadow, and could not use a powerful trump card like the demon transformation, he still retained the two profession templates of the mage and dark guardian. Coupled with the dragon's innate ability to spit fire, the number of monsters was not a problem at all. It was just a matter of spitting a few more dragon breaths. The only regret was that due to the intervention of the goddess of magic, all the magical energy in the entire Faron continent was controlled by a special system called the magic net. No matter who wanted to extract the energy to form spells, they had to complete a ritual called touching the net. Therefore, it was impossible to cast any spells learned from Dalaran at the moment. In short, to cast spells in the Faerun continent, first of all, one had to register with the goddess of magic's magic net. Secondly, one had to follow the rules of the magic net system. Through repeated casting and research, one had to come into contact with the deeper and more complex magic net and finally achieve the goal of improving one's spellcasting level. This also meant that all spellcasters in this world were essentially under the surveillance and control of the goddess of magic. Once the goddess forbade an unlucky person from touching the net, they would immediately lose most of their ability to cast spells. Even the gods were no exception. However, everything had a good and bad side. The good side was that under the precise control of the magic net, spellcasters could often greatly increase the number of spells they could cast without weakening the power and range of their spells. Of course, other than the goddess of magic's original magic net, there is also a little-known shadow magic net in the Faerun continent. It was created by the goddess of night, Shar. However, this goddess was not a good person either. Anyone who used a shadow magic net for a long time would have their mind greatly damaged. All in all, if Zhang Cheng wanted to recover his abilities as a mage and study the profound magical knowledge of this world, he had to choose between the original magic net and the shadow magic net. As for the awakening of his innate magical talent, it would take at least a few decades or even a century. After all, the White Dragon was one of the 5-colored evil dragons in the Faerun continent. No, it should be said that white dragons were the most trashy and useless of all dragons. Compared to the intelligence and cunning of their own kind, white dragons were undoubtedly closer to wild beasts. This was especially so before they reached adulthood. They could only rely on their strong bodies to fight their enemies and were not good at using their brains. Very few white dragons awakened their magical talent before they reached adulthood. Otherwise, Icing Death would not have been so easily killed by 2 pure warriors. Fortunately, after absorbing the pure energy contained in Nesario's tear, Zhang Cheng was no longer an ordinary white dragon. To be precise, he was not too sure about his current state, so he did not dare to carelessly perform the ritual of touching the net. At least, he would not do so before he finished reading the unique magical theory of this world. However, everyone knew that the 10 Towns was the border between civilization and wilderness. It was difficult to even see a decent mage here, let alone an expensive mage tower. Coincidentally, the puppet controlled by the broken crystal, Akar Kaiser, happened to be a mage apprentice from Luskan, the city of 1,000 sails. He would definitely have a few books on basic magical theory in his hands. At the thought of this, Zhang Cheng could not help but reveal a playful smile on his face. He sighed softly. As expected, I'm more suited to the evil faction. Just as he finished speaking, he soared into the air, turning into a gigantic black dragon. Under the gaze of countless terrified gazes, he swept past the skies of Bryn Sandor and slowly landed in the middle of a group of trolls. The one leading this group of trolls was none other than the demon from the bottomless abyss, Axel Thew. Please state your intentions, dragon. Axel Thew carefully took 2 steps back, letting his trolls stand in front of him as he secretly prepared a powerful spell. As a flame bailer, he was not as fearful of dragons as the residents of the prime material plane. In fact, as long as he was willing to pay a certain price, he could kill most adult dragons. I want to see the tyrant of Icewind Valley, Akar Kaiser. Zhang Cheng stated his intentions without hesitation. Chapter 420. No one knew what was said between the demon and the black dragon. No one even knew what sort of agreement they had reached. In short, after a short conversation, Axel Thew allowed the dragon to stay in the midst of the massive monsters, while he went to a place a few hundred meters away from Bryn Sandor's high walls. He raised his arms high and loudly chanted a vague, ancient incantation. In the blink of an eye, the crystal under his feet that was constantly emitting strange energy began to pulsate intensely, and the sunlight that had just shot out from the horizon was all distorted as it surged into the crystal. It was obvious that the scene before their eyes had completely stunned the mortals who had no idea what magic was. After all, the sun had always been synonymous with justice, warmth, life, and all sorts of wonderful meanings. But now, a fellow that had popped out of nowhere actually had power that was almost above the sun. Coupled with an army of monsters that stretched as far as the eye could see, it was simply despairing to the extreme. Feeling the sunlight being continuously converted into pure, magical energy, Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and muttered softly, "Unbelievable. As an evil divine artifact, the source of Clinchinian's power is actually the sun, a positive energy that is diametrically opposed to itself. However, the Naru seems to transform into a shadow form after exhausting its holy light. Perhaps I can start from this aspect and uncover the mystery of the mutual conversion of energy." Just as he was muttering to himself, the replica of the broken magical crystal grew larger and larger, until it finally grew into an extremely beautiful crystal tower. All the monsters with low intelligence saw this scene and immediately shouted as if they had gone mad, "Kaiser! Kaiser! Kaiser!" There was no need to ask to know that these poor fellows had been controlled by the indescribable magical power of the broken magical crystal. To be precise, through a series of hypnosis, suggestion, and dreams, it had invaded the spiritual world of the target, turning them into loyal servants of its wielder. "Follow me." Having completed the ritual, Axel Fu immediately beckoned to Zhang Cheng in his dragon form, and then strode into the doorway of the tower that was hung with mirrors on both sides. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng quickly passed through the space that was rather narrow for a dragon, and soon arrived in front of a large mirror. The demon made a strange gesture in front of the mirror, and the next second, a thin, hunchbacked young human appeared out of thin air on the other side of the mirror. He was wearing a smooth, red robe, and there was an arrogant and conceited smile on his pale face. After a full half a minute, he took the initiative to ask, "How was the plan going? Do the slaves of 10 towns tremble in front of my army?" Of course. Now, they were hiding behind the city walls, watching their homes being ravaged and destroyed with despairing eyes. Furthermore, I have recruited a potential ally for you, a true dragon that can destroy the will of your enemies to resist. Saying so, Axel Fu turned to the side to reveal the line of sight that was blocked by his enormous body. "Hello, tyrant of Icewind Valley, Akar Castle." Zhang Cheng lowered his huge head slightly, so that the guy in the mirror could see himself clearly. Oh, this was truly a huge surprise. "Tell me, what do you want from me, Black Dragon?" Akar's hands danced in excitement. He, who was born lowly, could not wait to have this enormous black dragon in front of him join his evil army, even if he had to pay a small price. After all, dragons were a symbol of strength and power in the eyes of many, and they could rely on their flying ability to easily fly over city walls, plunging a city into endless chaos and panic. Apart from a few powerful crossbows with complicated craftsmanship and magical power, there was nothing that could stop these prehistoric beasts. However, magical power was not something that could be possessed by just any city, especially the expensive construction cost of a wizard tower. It was enough to bankrupt the finances of more than 80% of the cities on this continent. Therefore, to a certain extent, many cities could do nothing but kneel and offer up their wealth in front of the dragons, begging for their mercy. As a former apprentice of the Arcane Brotherhood, Akar Castle was undoubtedly very clear about the terrifying, destructive power of the dragons. Although he already had a powerful demon as an ally, he still coveted magical creatures like dragons. Zhang Cheng noticed this, and an imperceptible mockery flashed in his eyes. He lowered his voice and said enticingly, "It's very simple. I wish to obtain some books and notes on magic. In exchange, I'm willing to carry you over the 10 towns. Think about it. If those idiots find out that their last line of defense, the city wall, is not effective at all, how wonderful would their expressions be?" "Ha ha, well said. I agree to your conditions." Accompanied by a burst of triumphant laughter, Akar Castle passed through the mirror and appeared out of thin air in the room, filled with translucent crystals. He directly handed over the basically worn-out books and notes. These were the spoils of war that he obtained when he killed his mentor, the Red Wizard, Emokai, especially the spellbook that he could not decipher until now. It recorded many powerful spells that he had once pried into. But now, he already had the broken magic crystal of the divine artifact. He no longer needed to painstakingly study complex and profound magical knowledge. Many times, he only needed a thought to cast powerful spells that even Emokai could not compare to. Of course, Akar Castle could not understand that all of his current abilities originated from that small crystal. If Clint Signon abandoned him, he would immediately be beaten back to his original state, and once again become a lowly apprentice that everyone could step on. However, Zhang Cheng obviously would not remind him of this. He waved his sharp dragon claws and roughly flipped through a few books and notes. Soon, he nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. This is exactly what I need. When are you going to let me fulfill our agreement? Don't be impatient, my dear friend. I still need some time to prepare. You must know that as the tyrant of Icewind Valley, I do not wish for my entrance ceremony to be too shabby. Akar Castle's eyes flashed with malice and madness. He quickly left the room, and no one knew what he wanted to do. After watching him leave completely, Axel Thew cracked a smile and said sarcastically, hiding an extremely lowly soul under an extremely arrogant exterior. Very interesting, isn't it? Interesting? No, the truly interesting thing is not this boring fellow, but the broken magic crystal in his hand. Zhang Cheng winked with a half-smile. Remember your promise. Clint Signon is mine. When Axel Thew heard about the broken magic crystal, he immediately exploded with a strong sense of anger. Don't worry. I swear that as long as you are present, I will never take the initiative to snatch the broken magic crystal. Oh, right. I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do. Excuse me for a moment. Chapter 421. While Akar Kaiser was preparing for his magnificent appearance ceremony, Drizzt Dutchelden was hiding in a secluded cave, engaging in a sleep unique to the elves, meditation. To be precise, he was trying to awaken the memories of his hometown in the Underdark, Menzoberranzan, so that he could find the name of the powerful Baelor that stood out among the army of monsters. But before he could meditate for long, the dark elf ranger who had escaped from the underground world suddenly felt a gust of wind blowing in from the cave entrance, followed by a violent tremor from the ground. Out of instinctive vigilance, he forced himself to shake off those painful memories and quickly woke up from his meditation state. The moment he opened his eyes, his limbs stiffened and he didn't dare to move an inch. This was because there was a giant dragon covered in black scales blocking the only entrance with a pair of eyes that resembled two fireballs. The dark elf couldn't guarantee that if he made any hostile or threatening actions, he wouldn't be met with a deadly dragon's breath. He clearly remembered that the black dragon before him was originally a white dragon, but for some unknown reason, it suddenly changed. The dragon's breath wasn't the white dragon's frost breath, nor was it the black dragon's acid breath. Instead, it was the red dragon's flame breath. This also meant that under the scorching flames that could melt steel, he wouldn't even have a chance to resist being blocked in the cave. At most, he would be roasted alive in 2 strokes. Good morning, Drizzt Dutchelden, faithful believer of the goddess of the forest and rangers. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly sensed the nervousness of the other party and took the initiative to greet him. Greetings, respected Sky King, ruler of the Great Glacier. Please allow me to apologize for my and my companion's rudeness last time. Please believe me, that was merely a small misunderstanding. The ranger hurriedly took the opportunity to bow elegantly. At the same time, all sorts of compliments and flattery were thrown out. As a dark elf who had grown up in Menzoberranzan, lying was as easy as eating and drinking to him. Especially when facing an enemy he couldn't defeat, he didn't mind displaying his eloquence to the extreme. Misunderstanding? Ha ha! Zhang Cheng seemed to have heard something funny. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. It lasted for a while before he slowly calmed down. He looked at the other party with interest and said with a smile, "All right, if you say it's a misunderstanding, then so be it. Relax, I'm not here to make trouble for you. On the contrary, I'm here to help you." Help me? Drizzt eyes were filled with doubt. He really couldn't think of any reason why this colossal beast, who had a huge grudge against him and Wolfgar, would help his enemy. Zhang Cheng pretended not to see the distrust in the dark elf's eyes and nodded lightly. Yes, I know you're looking for memories of that demon. As a greeting gift, let me tell you his name. You know his name? Drizzt's expression suddenly became tense. Perhaps many people on the surface world did not know what the name of a demon meant. But as a dark elf, he knew very well that once he knew the name of a demon, he could summon the corresponding demon through complicated rituals. Very few demons would resist this kind of summoning. His name is Urdu. Oh, right, I have a small surprise for you. Zhang Cheng placed the magical curved sword, icing death, at the entrance of the cave. After doing all this, he rose into the air and flew in the direction of the magic crystal tower. What is this dragon trying to do? Drizzt frowned and muttered softly as he watched the colossal dragon's body gradually disappear into the distance. But soon, he was deeply attracted by the weapon placed on the huge rock at the entrance of the cave. The fine gold hilt inlaid with gems was exceptionally exquisite. It was also carved into the shape of a cheetah's sharp teeth. Just by holding it in his hand, he could feel its power and extraordinariness. At the same time, in front of the magic crystal tower outside the walls of Bryn Sander, a unique farce was unfolding. In order to hide his lowly soul hidden under his arrogant appearance, Akar Kaiser unscrupulously wasted the energy accumulated by the magic crystals, just to increase the reverence of the ordinary citizens of the 10 towns. He had no idea how serious the consequences of this stupid decision would be. A red light first appeared at the bottom of the magic crystal tower, spiraling up along the transparent wall. Then, a blue light appeared at the top of the tower and spiraled down. When the two lights met, they mixed into a dazzling green, and then quickly separated, as if nothing had happened. The citizens of the 10 towns, who had never seen the power of magic, were completely stunned by the magnificent show in front of them. They watched everything that was about to happen without blinking. As the two lights spun faster and faster, the entire base of the magic crystal tower was gradually surrounded by a dazzling green light. After a while, two trolls holding gorgeous mirrors walked out of the tower. Before the citizens of the 10 towns could figure out what was happening, all the lights suddenly disappeared. The next second, bang, two beams of light shot out from the top of the tower, each hitting one of the mirrors. After the reflection of the mirrors, they finally converged at a point in front of the tower, forming a dazzling white electric light. When the electric light disappeared, a thin, hunchbacked figure appeared out of thin air. The surrounding goblins, trolls, giants, and ogres all knelt down, burying their heads deep in the frozen soil. At this point, the citizens hiding behind the walls of Bryn Sander realized that the legendary tyrant of Icewind Valley had arrived. The sight of the faces of fear, awe, and confusion on the other side of the wall satisfied Akar Castle's poor pride greatly. Just as he was about to step forward and give a speech, mocking the leader of Bryn Sander, Cassios, who had once ignored him, a huge shadow fell from the sky. Boom! As he deliberately did not slow down his fall, Zhang Cheng left two deep claw marks on the frozen ground with the terrifying weight of his dragon form. After he steadied himself, he bent down and used his left wing to build a simple climbing ladder. Then he said to Akar Castle, "I think now is the best time to fulfill our agreement. What do you think?" Yes, I think so too. The latter said nothing and immediately climbed onto the dragon's back excitedly. Facing the cold wind of the north, he looked down at the walls of Bryn Sander from above.